Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we have a Finance Committee meeting. We have 3 appropriations this evening. They'll have presentations, and then we'll be looking for a vote later on this evening. Jen, can you call the roll?
Counselor Ash. Counselor Kane.
Present.
Counselor Campbell.
Present.
Counselor Devine.
Present.
Counselor DeBono.
Present.
Counselor Harris. Counselor Liang.
Present.
Counselor Minton.
Present.
Chairman McCarthy.
Present.
9 members, you have a
Thank
quorum.
you. Can we please stand to do the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The open meeting. Open meeting law. Copy. Nope. I got 2. Read one word from each side. Before we begin, I want to read the open meeting law into the record. Pursuant to the open meeting law, any person may make an audio or video recording of this public meeting or may transmit the meeting through any medium. Attendees are therefore advised that such recordings or transmissions are being made, whether perceived or unperceived, by those present and are deemed acknowledged and permissible. Good evening. As I mentioned briefly, we have 3 items that we are going to see presentations tonight from Commissioner Grazioso and his staff, along with, I believe, Director Grennan and the TPAL group. We'll cover the 3 in subcommittee. We'll move them on to the council, and we'll vote them up and vote it down later on this evening. So with that, I'd like to bring the commissioner to the podium. And one item, I'd like to just make an adjustment if I could. We're going to have to vote on 3 items, 122, 123, and 124, but to save a little time, I'm going to have Al bunch the first appropriation and the last appropriation, 122 and 124 together, and then go back to the Water Enterprise Fund. This way, we're talking a little bit more about roads and sidewalks, et cetera, together, so we don't jump back and forth. So if that's okay with you, Commissioner, you're
Chairman.
at the green light to go.
Just so, given a package to all of you, because you had asked at the last meeting, on the list of roadways. So you have a packet like this. It's going to show you the proposed roads that we plan to pave. Everything you see in green is sewer work that is related to the road work. And that's why we're asking for the money out of the sewer bond. We have a list of roads that are proposed roads. If you go further down, you'll see a list of roadways that are alternate roadways, if funding allows. Behind that, you'll see a list of current roadways that will be complete in the spring. In the last page are roads that are to be paved by National Grid or the state. So it's just a complete package of what the work you'll be seeing completed in the next 3 to 4 years. So as you see on the screen, again, this is our first authorization is for $26 million. 18 would be for road and sewer work, and $6 million would be for a new truck facility that would have a truck washing facility and a sewer truck storage facility. Again, this goes back to the work that's been completed from 2018 to 24 under previous CIP. It shows you each year what we completed, the amount of roadways, sidewalks, spot repairs, water main, sewer lining, and sewer repairs. This is a map, again, it shows you all of the roadways we've completed in the city under the previous CIP, and that includes work that is being completed this year. Anything in red is a road paved, anything in yellow is a road that received a water main, and anything in red and yellow is a water main with a roadway paved. So at this time, I'm just going to turn this over to Ed Grennan, and this is part of the Council Order 2025-124 that talks about traffic improvements as part of this following.
Thank you, Al. Mr. Chairman, councilors, good to see you. So what you're going to see tonight is what we are proposing for the $4 million of general obligation bond that you saw about a month ago. The projects that you'll see fall into two buckets. The first bucket is intersections that we're looking to do partial or complete reconstruction based on the DPW road restoration schedule, and then also some existing critical maintenance issues that we have. And then the second bucket is a smaller bucket that handles smaller scale projects, signal equipment for visibility improvements, pedestrian buttons, pedestrian indicators. So the first two projects you're going to see are in that first bucket. Washington Street at Sumner. That is a existing maintenance issue that we uncovered in the spring. There's failing signal infrastructure underground here that is, unfortunately, it's old asbestos-lined conduit that's breaking and needs to be abandoned. So the intersection needs to be completely trenched across, new pipes, new signal heads need to move. Because of the scale of the repair, we're pitching that we reconstruct the intersection to bring it up to today's standards, overhead indications, pedestrian improvements, APS buttons with audible chirpers. To accommodate that work, there will be some pedestrian bump outs on the corners to cite some new overhead indications, mast arms as described. And then Hancock at Furnace Brook, this is a intersection that has inadequate indications. There's no overhead, no mast arms. We're looking to just bring that into the current times to improve the function of that intersection. These next two projects fall into that same first bucket. Southern Artery at Pond Street. This is an intersection that the level of service is lower than it could be based on how much width we have in the road. What we're looking to do here is bring the intersections back up to current standards, add some turn lanes to get into CVS to get onto Pond Street from Southern Artery to help with the operations there. And then Washington Street at Southern Artery is the last bigger intersection we're looking to touch. This is a top 200 statewide crash location. It's close to multiple schools. It's not very walkable due to wide crosswalks and the amount of vehicles that go through it every single day. I don't know if it's our top intersection, but it's in the top 3. It's up there. So this is one that we've been looking for an opportunity to get into, and with the DPW in the state looking to come through this corridor with some paving, we think it's a good time to target some improvements. These 4 projects that you see, the budgets will show at the end, and the budgets are inclusive of engineering, design, buying the equipment, and then getting that installed by somebody. And then this is the second bucket. These are smaller scale projects. These are locations that have some equipment worth saving. So what we're looking to do is to buy new signal equipment, new pedestrian heads, pedestrian buttons. You can see the list: Hancock at Woodbine, Quarry at Common. There's no overhead indications there. Southern Artery at South Street near Clifford Marshall School. That one is a little bit unique in that it could have been its own bucket. What we're looking to do there is a geometric bump out of one of the corners to add a crosswalk. It currently has one crosswalk across Southern Artery. We're looking to add one to increase functions for the kids over at Clifford Marshall School. And then Newport Ave at Holbrook, Hobart, and Brook Street. That is just all old overhead stuff that we're looking to fix in light of National Grid going through and paving the streets for us. So here you will see broken down by project, our project budgets. Again, these numbers are inclusive of design, build, and yeah, happy to answer any questions. And now I'm going to pass it off to Mr. Mason for the financial piece of the presentation.
You know, yeah, why don't we have some questions for you and Al right now before Mr. Mason comes in with the numbers. That'll be a whole chapter in the book itself, so.
Sure.
We'll start with Mr. Grennan. Council Devine, if you have it for Mr. Grennan?
I don't have a question on the numbers, but Furnace Brook and Hancock, is that a state intersection?
That is a city-owned intersection.
That one is, even then Furnace Brook is?
Yep.
State road?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. I was just curious because, and I know you guys are 100% professional and very good at your jobs.
Thank you.
One of the biggest things when I was campaigning a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, was I guess maybe the lights at Hancock and Copeland. I mean, Furnace Brook and Copeland are kind of older,
Yep.
and that's state intersection, I believe.
That's a city intersection.
That's ours too?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay, good. It needs some paint. I'll talk to you about that later.
Yeah, I will await your call.
But I was hoping that as they get redone, are they going to be like smart intersections that talk to each other, like all the way down Furnace? Like, is that something you guys do, or will you be doing that? Like,
On a case-by-case basis, we do any projects that you see here in we call the first bucket. If the intersections aren't already on our MyoVision smart system, they'll be brought into that. That gives us the remote capability to monitor, to get into the system to make any sort of changes if we need to the phasing or the timings. Some video playback to see if anything happened, like what put the intersection on the fritz, that sort of thing. Furnace Brook Parkway, we don't own all the traffic signals on Furnace Brook Parkway, so it would be a broken system. And also the intersections aren't close enough together that it would make sense to run them coordinated.
okay, yeah.
Generally, you see those in like tightly packed intersection systems. But to answer part of your question, anything we do here will bring the signal into our interface that allows us remote
Well, with
capability.
all the
and
cameras
monitoring.
and stuff there, yeah. It is pretty cool in your office where you can see all those different
Yeah.
screens, and you're really on the ball. So I want to say thank you for that.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to make mention of that in case it was something. But yeah, keep up the good work.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Counselor. Chair recognizes Counselor Ash.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Director Grennan, for this presentation, and also Commissioner Grazioso. I do just want to highlight how nice it is to see these items hit our meeting after we discuss them. So I have great meetings with Director Grennan and with Ali Rule every month, and we talk about these big items. You know, it's easier for us to say, can you put a sign here? Can you do a study on this? Do you mind checking out this light? But items like Southern Artery and Washington Street, and Southern Artery and Pond Street, and Washington Street and Sumner, those are Sumner and Edison, I'm sorry. Those are big ticket items, at least for me, and I'm sure, they indirectly affect all of us. So it's nice to see some appropriations for those. And, there is the, outside of the large buildup at 3A in Washington, certainly we've discussed the Washington Street at Sumner and Edison. I know that was in large part for a low vision constituent of mine who had some trouble hearing actually the audio at that. But it's nice when I bring up some issues and then they spiral out into bigger problems, but even better solutions. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Chair recognizes Counselor Minton.
Thank you. Mr. Granite, thank you so much for helping me out with Hospital Hill.
Absolutely.
Ongoing problem. And I do appreciate the assistance. Looking at Hancock Street at Furnace Brook, the third option, the alignment of Hancock turning left onto Furnace Brook, going north on Hancock, is that what you're talking about, the realignment?
Yeah, we had done a sort of a partial realignment there to move the lane over. In doing that, it is not perfect with coming southbound that we sort of did it piecemeal. We're looking to holistically look at the intersection to make sure everything flows correctly through that. But yes, that is what we're talking about.
Yeah, a few people have mentioned it to me that people going south on Hancock, turning right onto Furnace Brook, if they don't do that, then you're going to be in a bad accident. You're going to get sideswiped. So
Yeah,
that's good to look at that. I appreciate it.
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Councilor. Chair recognizes Councilor Liang.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had a quick question for the both of you. For those who are tuning in at home, again, just a PSA, right? How can they take a look at the progress, maybe through the city's website, if they're curious about their streets or folks are reaching out, if we can direct them to anywhere that's, again, just accessible for folks to like maybe type something in and look something up for either traffic improvements or roadway improvements? I mean, in the past, up until now, when I get those questions, I just reach out directly to you, and you both are very responsive in giving, updates. But again, just for folks at home who maybe, aren't upset about anything, but just are curious about updates and don't feel like they want to necessarily reach out, but want to look online, is that an option for folks at home to look into?
Yeah, the TPAL, we have a project highlights page on our website. The website, as you probably know, just went under construction. It came out nice, so we are being more active on the website, trying to make sure everything is updated so that the residents do have somewhere that they can go without having to feel like they have to drop in or pick up the phone. So that's definitely something that we're working on. We're also trying to be a little bit more active on social media. We started a Facebook page to try and push out some of the projects that we're working on that people may not be aware of, or people might want to learn more about, and try to point people back to the website. So it's definitely something that we're working on.
Okay, so project highlights, you said, on the
Yes.
city's website?
Yep.
Okay. And is that the same for DPW then as well, for any roadway improvements? If, again, residents are just curious to type in a street name and see an update on the progress, if it's in the queue at all?
Yeah, we're also working on that. It's a little bit, we have a pretty extensive spreadsheet, but it pretty much could change by the hour depending on the contractor, National Grid, where we are. So it's constantly being updated. We do work with the mayor's office to try to get that information out to people.
All right, so the best bet right now is still just to reach out to counselors or folks in your office, right, for those answers? Great, sounds good. Thank you both, appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair recognizes Councilor DeBona.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to piggyback a little bit off of Councilor Devine with the state roads and the city-owned roads, when you go into your protocols, your strategy, or your needs assessment of what roads and sewer and water repairs that you need to do you factor into the fact that some of these are the state-owned, like, roads? How do you master that balance, I guess I could say?
Sure. That's probably a question more for Al's team. We don't have any state infrastructure. We don't share infrastructure, so that's not a decision point for us, really. I know that Al has some state
Yes.
roads, assets on state roads.
Sure, we still control water mains and sewer and those things on the state road. For instance, the National Grid roads that are being done over, that they put the electrical line in through Furnace Brook Parkway, we went in, took the opportunity to go in and redo our water mains on those roads because they were old. So yeah, wherever if there is a state road, part of Southern Artery is technically it's a state road. We're doing the water mains on those roads.
Do you have to ask permission or let them aware, or how's that different to us?
Parkway, we would get a permit from
Okay.
DCR for that.
And then you would probably try to go in and take care of it if it's a huge need. So you look at the whole map, the whole city, and you narrow down what's the needs, and then you go after, okay,
Correct.
okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Is
Chairman.
that Councilor?
Yep.
Anyone else with questions for Director Grennan, Commissioner Graz? Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll have Mr. Mason come up, and we'll talk finances. Thank you.
Good evening, Chairman.
Good evening, Eric. How are you?
Council. Let me just fast forward to our section. Last Wednesday, we delivered a copy of the financial summary to the councilors, to the council office, as you're all aware. I just want to thank you. I know many of you reached out to my office and answered some of the more complicated questions up front, but I'm going to run through the major highlights right now. So to start off, we're looking at a $41.5 million CIP that's distributed across 3 different council orders. We have we have $24 million being supported directly out of the out of the sewer CIP, with $18 million for sewer long line replacements, which I know the commissioner covered, along with $6 million for the design and construction of a sewer washdown facility. Council Order 2024-123, that's the water CIP, solely supported out of the Water Enterprise Fund for $5.5 million, and that is to upgrade water tanks. And the final measure is a general fund appropriation. It's for a total of $12 million. $8 million of that is for roadway, sidewalks, and general horizontal infrastructure improvements, with $4 million for the traffic centers the director of TPAL outlined. To kind of break down the plan a little bit more for the major highlights in terms of cost, the sewer CIP is going to have an average rate increase over its lifespan of 82 cents. The water CIP similarly will have an annual rate increase of 17 cents. And for the general fund CIP, we're looking at an average single-family tax bill over the life of the bonding to be about $19.47. And over the course of an estimated 20-year borrowing cycle, the total will be about $447.83. To talk a little bit about the borrowing parameters and rate forecasts, I know that's something, especially in light of the recent rate cut, is probably, it's the most important part, really, is that interest rate when it comes to the borrowing of this. And what we're seeing is we're estimating a short-term band rate of about 3.5%. We're likely to ban this for 2 fiscal years as we wait for those rate cuts to kick in that we are seeing. And that the Fed continues to indicate that are coming. It's better off to wait and push off a year if we're going to experience 75 to 100 basis point cut. We're lucky we're no longer in an inverted rate environment anymore. So a lot of our forecasts are falling more in line with your traditional forecasts that are done in the bond market. Post-pandemic, we've been waiting for this rate recovery, and it seems to have arrived. In terms of what those bonds are going to look like, they're very likely going to have a call device attached to them, because the market consensus is that we are going to see probably at least 12 quarters of rate cuts, which will put us in a position where we'll be selling our bonds while rates may still continue to climb down. So being able to put a call feature on here will be very valuable. Some other things to consider as we look to borrow this money and as this $41.5 million gets absorbed into the market is that the rate cuts remain consistent. They remain something that is the market consensus and that we will foresee going forward. It's important to remember whether or not the rate cut occurs. If it's a market consensus, you're still going to have the effects as if that rate cut occurred. Year-over-year core inflation is about to hit a 12th month of being below 4%, which is a very good indicator. Even though the Federal Reserve targets 2%, there has been large-scale decoupling between the target 2% and the Federal Reserve's willingness to cut rates. And again, using bands for 2 years is going to allow us to put the city in the best position to sell these bonds to the market at the lowest possible interest rate. And just closing, an overall summary, again, about $41.5 million in total, 82-cent increase on the sewer water rate over its lifespan, 17-cent increase on the lifespan of the water rate during the CIP. Average single-family tax bill for the increase is expected to be $19.47. And average lifespan for these notes for this bonding action is going to be between 17 and 22 years. And I'm happy to take any questions on the finances from the council.
Chair recognizes Councilor DeBona.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our favorite topics, the bands and the bonds.
I love 'em.
Eric, thank you for coming in for your presentation. Obviously, the feds have dropped the rates this past week. I think it was Thursday. Do you anticipate another rate cut? And I know you're going to look to do the bands for over a 2-year period, 1 year, 1 year. Is that how you're going to do it? And then you're going to play. Do you anticipate possibly with obviously a change of presidency and the economy and all these other things, do you anticipate it getting below 3%?
Yes, I do. I think the Federal Reserve, especially now that there's a consensus that it was a soft landing, I do feel they're going to continue with these programmatic rate cuts. As long as we continue to see inflation measured and we still continue to see real wage growth, there's no reason for them not to cut it. Last month's job report was not fantastic, but there's many acyclical reasons why that occurred. when we stretch this out over 12 quarters. 12 quarters is a really important number when it comes to tax policy. If we follow the Roman tax series, it does show us that there's a certain smoothing that happens over that period, and everything that the Fed has indicated relative to its willingness to cut rates is lining up over that period. So I would be very surprised if we didn't see more pronounced rate cuts.
What were we at about 3 years ago? I know rates on houses and stuff, 2.75, 3%.
Exactly.
Obviously this, were we ever below 2%?
Yeah, so some bonds we have been below 2%.
Okay.
Because an important caveat is our bonds are non-taxable, where federal bonds are taxable. So we do receive about 100 to 150 basis point reduction against high quality market bonds and treasuries. Obviously, treasuries have effectively zero asymmetric risk, so they're priced a little differently. No, we did have bond sales below 1%. Our band sold,
Yep.
our POB sold for 2.62%. At one point, we had a band sell for 13 basis points, which I don't think will ever happen again, if I'm being honest.
So our bands, are we continuing to do the interest onlys, the
Yes.
bands, and then you switch over when you think it's time to make the move?
Yes, if we believe rates are going to go up in the future, we'll bond immediately. If we believe rates are going to go down, we'll use the band to bridge to the lower rate because it does save money.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Eric.
Chair recognizes Councilor Yang.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hi, Eric. I just had a question about the debt service to budget ratio. So it says in the booklet here that we're going to peak at 7.48. And I know that we always look at sort of having a range between 6 and 7.5. So we're going to be right at like the top of that, right? And how does that impact then our borrowing for the years to come if we take this on and it brings us right to that cap?
Yes, we have a pretty pronounced debt cliff immediately following that. There's a lot of MSBA projects that were approved in the early 2000s that were on 20-year notes that have fallen off. So we're actually projected to go from a 7.48% within 5 years to be down almost at 5.6%.
Okay.
So as you very accurately pointed out, Counselor, we get to the top of that number, but then there's going to be additional borrowing needed to stay above the 6% number.
Great. And you said that's within the next 5 years that'll go down?
Within 5 years of these becoming bonds, so in the next
Okay.
6 to 7 fiscal years.
Okay. Great. Just wanted to check. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other councilors?
Maybe we shouldn't, right? 'Cause it's 6.
Thank you, Mr. Mason.
Thank you, Counsel. Thank you.
Commissioner, if you could touch on the appropriation, where are we? 5.5 million, 2024, 123. If you could touch on that a little bit in regards to, I know it's lining the water tanks. Is that the extent of that 5.5, or?
It's lining it, I can have, city engineer can speak to this, but it's lining, it's painting the tanks, which is a big project.
Is it two? Two tanks?
Water tanks, it will be,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, Mr. Costello could briefly
Yeah.
touch on that. I know that we might have a few questions on that. I think the other two appropriations combined covered everything else, and Mr. Mason did a nice job.
Good evening.
Good evening.
The request is for 5.5 million, and it's for the rehabilitation of 2 of our water tanks. The city has 2 water tanks, Quarry Street and Raschuti Drive. There is a 3rd tank, Battery March Park, that's obsolete, and we don't use that tank anymore. The request is for painting of the tanks and some structural deficiencies. The tanks were inspected back in December 2022. The tanks, like the rest of the system, is highly regulated by the DEP and the EPA to a lesser extent, and these recommendations are highly recommended. It'll help improve water quality and
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Costello? Mr. Devine?
Commissioner. Painting it, I see like Brockton has Brockton painted on their water towers and stuff. We don't really have anything on there. While they're painting it, would we ever think about dressing it up? You know, like maybe not the one up on Raschuti, you know, you can see it. And I figure if you're up there, why not? Maybe, I have also heard about ones where they use illumination, where they solar powered and they can print something on it. So I don't know if if that's something we can talk about.
We're open to suggestions.
Yeah, because I mean, like, it's great, I love maintenance, you have to do it, and preventative stuff, and it's expensive. But I figure if somebody's up there working on it, we might be able to get a deal to get something painted or some type of, something kind of cool to, you know? Because we're always bragging about how well we're doing. I'd like to keep it going that way.
Maybe you could say vote Jim Devine.
Yeah, we could. I don't know if there'd be a conflict of interest there, but you might have just got me in trouble. But anyways, it's just a thought that I'd throw it out there while we're all sitting here. So, thank you.
Would run that through Mr. Walker, maybe he.
Yeah.
Counselor Campbell?
Thank you guys for coming in. And just curious on the rehab of these and moving them. There has to be a shutdown of one and open up another. You know, how would that process work? I don't know if that's and my vote is for Quincy High School on the. It is November.
So each of the tanks is about 1 million gallons each, and we coordinate the use of our system with the MWRA. So when the system is down, the MWRA can provide more water. It's all about controlling the pressures, because if the system is pressurized too much, then the water mains break. So we have to closely coordinate that. The Blue Hills tank is about 200 to 300 feet higher than the city of Quincy, so you can imagine the pressure that puts on our system.
And is there a time frame as to how long it would take to do that? Is there a?
They would paint the inside of the tanks, so obviously we have to take the water out, and the tanks on the outside could be painted with the water in the system.
Yeah.
So,
Interesting.
I'd say a few weeks probably.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before I look for a motion, I'd like to just ask if I could ask Commissioner Grazioso just a couple of questions. I think that I know a lot of the ward councilors get asked. I know that when we started with the capital improvement plan, when we put together all the numbers a few years back, prices have definitely gone up. And I'd like you to touch on that a little bit, and also touch on down the road I know we've done some tremendous work out there with cement sidewalks and granite curbing, and we have asphalt locations that are going to remain asphalt, regardless sometimes because of the width of the street and the location. But if you could touch on that too, Commissioner, just a little bit. I'll run over just a little bit, and then we'll take a vote and then go to the council meeting.
Sure. Well, to give you an example, obviously, as we know, with inflation, everything's gone up the last few years. To give you an example, I think in around 2020, when we did the CIP, we were paying about $332 a foot for roadway. Today, that cost is about $720 a foot. We're paying about $100 a cubic yard of concrete. Today, it's anywhere from $150 to $170, depending on how the bids come in. Asphalt's gone from $90 a ton to $125 a ton. So we have to look at how we do all our roads. We try to be competitive as we can be with the bids. We try to get our roadways designed quickly, get the bids out quickly, because we're competing with other cities and towns. There's only so many contractors. It all plays into the equation. I think moving forward, I have talked to a number of counselors about, we have had a policy, in the last few years, we've replaced all the sidewalks with concrete. The price is getting out of control, actually. The difference is probably $102 a cubic yard for asphalt compared to like I said, $150 to $170 for concrete. So moving forward, we will be, talking with the councils, but we may have to go back and look at some of the roadways and replace in kind. If it's asphalt, we replace with asphalt, concrete with concrete. Our main roadways, we would still keep concrete, but it's something, it's part of the discussion. When we put the bids out, we'll probably bid both ways with alternates to see how those prices come in. But it's something that, and we also we're going to look at micro sealing and other forms of paving on some of the mains, just to see if we can keep the costs down. Keep the costs down so we can get more roadways done.
No, no, thank you. I thought that was good. I know that you talked to me, I know you've talked to other ward councilors. I don't know if you've got to the at-larges, but, you know, you got it pretty laid out on what needs to be done, and the discussions will continue on different locations, I'm sure.
And we did benefit, I mean, based on Eric talked about the rates we received and the bonds, that $100 million CIP, well, we, you know, got a lot of that road work done quicker than was anticipated. So we got a lot of that done during COVID in those years when those prices were low, so we benefited from
Right.
that.
Right, thank you, Commissioner. Councilor DeWarna, real quick.
Mr. Chairman, just real quick, Al, talk about the asphalt. Can you do that in-house? And is that how you're going to price it out?
Well, we do, so, what we do in-house is, we do maintenance, you know, during the summer and paving season, like on sidewalks, you know, you're always calling to get sidewalks done. So we do that in-house on asphalt. Because of manpower and because of time, we contract out for replacement of concrete sidewalks.
So we don't do any in-house cement?
We
haven't.
do very
Okay,
little.
very little.
You know, but it's very time-consuming for our in-house crews. We do a tremendous amount of asphalt sidewalk work in the summertime in-house.
So if you see something that's out there right now that's asphalt, are you going to try to stay asphalt, or how's that?
Oh, yeah, I mean, if
Okay,
it's,
if it's
well,
asphalt, you stay asphalt, if it's,
it's all open for discussion.
yep.
And we're going to look at the bids and see how the pricing comes in.
I appreciate it. We've worked, you've done a real good job on some of the stuff that I need out there, so I appreciate it as an at-large counselor with the ward, so I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr.
Councilor.
Thank you,
Chairman.
Council. Thank you. I'd like to look for a motion so I can move on. A motion on 2024-122. A motion by Councilor Harris. All those in favor? Opposed? The ayes have it. 2024-123. Motion by Councilor Harris. All those in favor? And the last one, 2024-124. Appropriation. Councilor Harris makes the motion. All those in favor? Thank you. That takes care of that. We'll have these come up later on in the council meeting, and I'll adjourn at 7:07.
Good evening. Welcome to the Tuesday, November 12th, 2024 City Council meeting. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Counselor Ash. Counselor Campbell. Counselor Devine. Counselor DeBona. Counselor Harris. Counselor Liang. Counselor McCarthy. Counselor Minton. President Kane.
Present.
9 members.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Please stand for a moment of silence. Please use this moment as you will. Please turn to the flag for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, please read the open meeting law.
Pursuant to the open meeting law, any person may make an audio or video recording of this public meeting or may transmit the meeting through any medium. Attendees are therefore advised that such recordings or transmissions are being made, whether perceived or unperceived, by those present and are deemed acknowledged and permissible.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And please read the first item on the agenda.
First, we'll be honoring of Dr. Ed Fitzgerald of the Quincy Historical Society.
And here tonight to honor Dr. Fitzgerald is Counselor at Large Nina Liang.
God, even with the 5-inch heels, struggling. Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. President. I'm so honored to have this opportunity this evening to honor a true legend here in the city of Quincy, Dr. Edward Fitzgerald, the immediate past director of the Quincy Historical Society. Before I do so, I do want to just take a moment to recognize his right-hand person. As we all know, in service, we can't do this work without our loved ones uplifting us, inspiring us, and somebody who's done that not just for us, and not just for me personally, but for Ed to allow him to do this important work, is Norma Fitzgerald, who is going to hate me for doing this, but I just want to, first of all, recognize her and thank her for putting this together for us. Thank you, Norma. So it is with deep respect and appreciation that we recognize Ed Fitzgerald for your outstanding commitment to the city of Quincy through your service leading the Quincy Historical Society. Your devotion over the last 3 decades has laid the foundation for how Quincy's rich history is preserved and also brought it to life for generations of residents, visitors, and scholars alike. Your tireless work has strengthened our community's connections to its past and inspires others to carry that work forward. Thank you for your passion, your dedication, and your vision. Your legacy will undoubtedly continue to enrich our community for years to come. And Ed, before I ask you to come up, if I could actually just ask Mr. Jim Lyons, who is president of the Historical Society and is treasurer, to come up and say a few words, that'd be great.
Mr. President, members of the council, I was going to ad-lib a few notes and comments about Dr. Ed, but I deemed it too important to take that chance, so I wrote down some notes. I hope you don't mind if I refer to them during this brief presentation. J. Paul Getty once said his formula for success was rise early, work late, and strike oil. A great Quincy Historical Society success came about 25 years ago when it struck proverbial oil when Ed Fitzgerald came back to Quincy as director of the Quincy Historical Society after his predecessor left to take another job in New Hampshire. A Quincy native, Ed spent his formative years in the historic Bristol, Rhode Island, where his father was superintendent of schools. He later matriculated at prestigious Brown University and thereafter achieved graduate and PhD degrees at New York University. Subsequently, Dr. Ed dabbled in teaching as well as editing at national book publishing companies in the big city, all while living the bohemian lifestyle in and around Greenwich Village as he hung out somewhat vicariously perhaps with folks like Bob Dylan, Joni Mitchell, Joan Baez, and others. If you think that was exciting, the real excitement came when he met a woman named Norma Simons, another New Yorker, looking for someone, a cool guy, I guess, to hang around with in New York. And she found the ultimate cool guy in Dr. Ed. They formed a fast friendship. They ultimately were married. their son Peter came along at some point later on, and the rest is somewhat history. I'm not sure how exactly the stars ultimately lined up, but one day Ed and Norma headed back to Quincy from the Big Apple for Ed to take over as director of Quincy Historical Society. I got to know Dr. Ed during my stay on the Quincy Historical Commission. I was a member there while Ed and his boss at the Quincy Historical Society were members of the commission, the estimable Joyce Baker. And I got to know them there. And while these historical commission meetings were fabulously interesting, I said to myself, there's got to be something we can do after this get together to start to have some fun. So I made a suggestion that we all go to Coddington's across the street at President's Place. And Ed was the first one to raise his hand and say, I'm in. I got to know Ed a little better at that session, and it was wonderful to see the bright and fun and thoughtful man that he is. Ultimately, I got to know Ed a little better when I became a member of the Quincy Historical Society. Ed turns out to be a man of many talents. We've seen him as a board build almost single-handedly exhibits at City Hall and museums at Quincy Historical Society. He can write masterfully, he can lecture wonderfully. He created superb exhibits featuring the likes of Howard Johnson and this fabulous author from Quincy, Henry Beston, and his research on these lectures is beyond compare. There were also many functions he does at the society that nobody knows about. He's a personnel director, he's the accountant, he's the maintenance director, he's the snow shoveler. Ed is a multitasker there, and he does everything superbly well. He's an amazing fellow. Occasionally, Ed is also gives freely of his time and has lectured at various Quincy senior housing facilities, and he's also given wonderfully interesting presentations at Hancock Cemetery and also at Mount Wollaston Cemetery. He's been an advisor to the city and to Mayor Koch on a host of art and history issues and contributed mightily to the success of the Hancock-Adams Common. Occasionally, I am fortunate that Ed will find time to sneak off with me for a social session at a local watering hole. And we can talk about things, or I can listen to things, and Ed can talk about any subject you want to mention. History, no. Astronomy, sports, philosophy, medicine, music, he can talk about them all. His powers of recollection are absolutely unbelievable, and he's a joy to be with. But you know what's the best part of all? I've made a friend with Ed Fitzgerald, this really fascinating man, and this person who's just such a wonder in the city of Quincy. Of late, Dr. Ed has looked to slow down a bit and pass the torch, the one he has carried for so long. Quincy Historical Society recently saw the appointment of a new executive director, Alexandra Elliott, thus allowing Ed to step aside and enjoy a bit more time with Norma. He's not leaving us permanently at Quincy Historical Society anytime soon, I hope. But his emeritus director position will allow him to slow down as much as he wishes while continuing to lead by example and collaborate with Alexandra in the years ahead. We are indeed fortunate to have this kind of new kid on the block. She is talented, very smart, always willing to learn, and I know the board and I are extremely pleased that Alexandra has taken over for Ed. In the meantime, Ed, the city, the board, and our membership, and me, owe you a great deal for the wonderful job you have done through the years here at Quincy Historical Society. We thank you, we love you, and we wish you and Norma great happiness in the years ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. As we all know, Quincy has such a rich history, and Ed, you really cemented our place in that. And for that, I think we can all confidently say that you'll definitely cement your history here in the city. So congratulations again. And Mr. President, if I could have him come up, and of course Norma, and any other folks from the Historical Society to take a quick photo, but of course, if anybody else wants to speak as well, I'd want to make sure to give them the opportunity to.
Sure. We'll take a brief recess so we can take a photo.
Want to do a photo? Okay.
People are yelling a name at me. Tony, Richie, do you want to come up in here? Yeah.
No, I just want to say that Jim said it all. I think a part of our most recent history is that Jim took over from Joyce Baker, I took over from Sandra McCauley, and these names go way back in recent history. We're all getting to be a certain age, so it's kind of interesting. The other thing that I like to point out is that Ed and I both serve, I as chairman of the Historical Commission, and Ed as vice chairman, and we try to do a good job there as best we can. People always get the Quincy Historical Commission, which is a city branch of government, mixed up with the Quincy Historical Society, so we're always getting each other's communications. Ed's done a great job, and we look forward to him working with Alexandra as we go ahead. Thank you.
Thanks.
The photo. Ed, come on up. Norma, anybody else like to join us for the photo?
Okay, great. We'll take a brief recess. Thanks.
Thank you.
Get back to the program. Madam Clerk, please read the next item on the agenda.
Number 1, 2024-126, an appropriation for $108,712,832 for the new Squantum Elementary School project.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, tonight we've got a sizable presentation in front of us from the Commissioner of Public Buildings, Paul Hines. I do want to recognize some folks from the school department and school committee who are in the chambers tonight. We've got Superintendent Kevin Mulvey, Assistant Superintendent Aaron Perkins, and we have school committee member Kathy Hubley. Thanks for being here tonight, amongst a host of others who I'm sure you'll introduce.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. President. I never thought before I would wish for Jim Edwards to speak longer. But having a little technical difficulty, but the only thing you've heard, but Jen bailed us out. So I want to say how excited we are to finally be here at this point with the committee, the council, and earlier the finance committees. You supported the Squantum project throughout. We're in a great place. We're very excited. It's been a long process to get here, but now we're moving forward at a great rate, a great speed, with a great project. I do truly appreciate your past support on this project, as I'm sure do all the faculty, staff, school committees, school administration, and students of the Quincy Public Schools. Together with the mayor and yourselves, this is going to be a beautiful building. I'd like to introduce you tonight to a new team player. With your support and with the support of the mayor, we went forward with the Chapter 149 delivery method on this building, whereby we have a construction manager at risk. We went through a very robust process to get there. We had a great response of 8 very, very strong candidates. Went through the review of the papers, went through interviews, went through a number of sessions, and ultimately decided upon the local Quincy firm, which did truly not play into it, but Lee Kennedy and Company. And we do have a representative here tonight. We have, down the end, I'll have him stand up. And I wrote his name down, now I can't even find it. What's your name? Tom LeClaire. I'm sorry, I'm starting off gangbusters here. They've been a great partner to date, and we really look forward to working with them. They bring a great deal of experience and knowledge and wisdom to the table. We also have a number of the old players that you've seen before. Each will have particular roles tonight, and I'll just very briefly tell you what those are. We do have Eric Mason and Rick Coso from municipal finance, if there's questions in that regard when we get there. We have Tom Kerwin and Brian LaRoche from our OPM PCA 360. And we have Larry Sprang and Tina Sue Hu from our designer architect Arrow Street. As the president alluded to, we have Superintendent Mulvey here and Assistant Superintendent Dr. Erin Perkins. Department of Public Buildings, you of course have myself and Gary Cuniff and Walter McDonald. In addition, we have Joe Shea Jr. from Granite Seed Partners. Tandem to this project and kind of in concert with it and its funding request tonight, Joe is leading up an off-site infrastructure improvement effort for us in coordination and cooperation with the Department of Public Works. This summer, they installed a new 18-inch storm drain behind the building to alleviate a long-standing flooding problem in the area, particularly at Mayflower Road. So the school project, the development of the school project will deal with stormwater on its site, but flooding in the neighborhood was still an issue and a concern. So that pipe should address that. In addition, they installed new water mains in the Haagen-Dazs Reach impacted by this project, and I believe ongoing now is the rehabilitation of the sewer lines. So Joe Shea will present on that aspect of it. With those projects and with some other things we have done, we have actually already started this project, whether it be exploration wells, test pits for the geothermal, or other efforts. But the early winter and spring of 2025 is going to be quite busy in the neighborhood, advancing what we need to do in order to keep the project schedule, which would have the students out of the 1947 two buildings and the 1919 building for September of 2025. We're bringing in modular classrooms that the faculty and staff and others and parents have toured at other sites with great success and great excitement. I think I told you before, the joke was they're fighting on who gets to go into the modulars and get out of the building. In addition to that, there's other infrastructure work needing to be done, undergrounding of electric conduits and bringing in new service lines, new transformer and such, just be able to support both our temporary condition and the permanent condition going forward. The temporary condition, as I suggested, is the mobile classrooms, but in addition, we are utilizing for the couple of years the 1971 portion of the building, which needs to have its systems divorced from the 1940s buildings of the 1919 building. So there's a great deal of work to do. It's going to be very challenging to get done, but the team feels confident that can be done. We need the cooperation of all involved, staff, faculty, students, parents, neighbors, the city, departments, and it can work. Assuming the successful support and appropriation by the council tonight, our next step would be with the MSBA for the project funding agreement. And that's the nut bolts on what goes into the project financially, what they replenish, what they reimburse, and Brian LaRoche will be going into that in detail. So I will first introduce Tina Sue Hu and Larry Sprang from Arrow Street and ask them to come up for their presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for having us tonight. MSBA projects. For sure. There has been many successful projects with the MSBA, and these are highlighting the most recent ones, including the Quincy High School, Central Middle School, and Southwest Middle School. In addition to those core programs, the Quincy has also had success in many of their accelerated repair programs, and these are a list of many of them that has happened, but also ongoing. In the interest of time, I'm going to jump right into the Squantum School itself. As many of you are familiar with the site, what you see here is the school itself as it currently sits. Directly behind it, as you all know, is the park. And we're really distinguishing the two, but as we had discussions with the district, with the city, school building committee, as well as the school, it is very much integrated as part of the school design. On the following slides, we're going to show you the site plan. As I mentioned, it is integral to the design of the school. This new school is going to be sitting on its current site. As Commissioner Hines had mentioned, it is sitting on existing site. There is a fair amount of logistics in using the 1971 building as swing space for the school as modulars while the new building gets built. There will be some improvements as well as part of the school on the park. You'll notice in terms of some of the landscaping. There you go. Thank you. Thank you. The site design that's integral as part of the park, you'll notice that much of the improvements as far as landscaping, but also maintaining existing trees is important, as well as any trees that had to be removed, we are replacing them in caliper on both the school site as well as the park. Some of the sustainability aspects, we started to look at this very early on as we dived into feasibility. One of the top issues is net zero being an important component of this project. Many of the things that follow under net zero, for instance, all electric building, having geothermal feeds into that as well as solar, but many other aspects, and having a healthy building for its occupants is important too. Part of this you'll see later on is part of the funding and incentives. We're working with Mass Saves as well as looking into federal incentives as part of this project. This is really just a zoomed in view of the site plan itself. As you can see, we're providing on-site parking for staff as well as van and bus drop-off. We have been working with the traffic engineer to really understand the needs and improvements that are necessary as part of the site, and I'll go into that a little bit later on. But we wanted to jump into the floor plans a little bit, and not to get really into the details of it, but we've been working with the school, the district very closely as part of the envisioning of what the ED program would be, which is very important as part of the school and moving into a 21st century learning space. What you see here is that there is a classroom wing as well as community spaces that is part of their learning space, such as the cafeteria, gym, and media center. What you'll also see here is outdoor classroom that is part of the interior courtyard of the space. I will mention a good portion of the 1919 building, which I didn't point out, but we'll also have some views of it, is very much an asset and valued to the community. And that portion that faces Huckins is maintained, renovated, and utilized as part of the school's learning spaces. It is a two-story building, and really it's the second floor contains more of the classrooms. The last floor plan really is there's a small portion that is a basement level, I should say lower level, that contains custodial and MEP. I'm going to hand it over to Larry Spang to talk about some of the renderings and architecture that we have.
Great, thanks, Sina. And thank you, Mr. President and members of City Council. Appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about the project. As you can imagine, trying to put a new building into the middle of the Squantum community was an important consideration for us from the very beginning, and it was clear from the guidance we were receiving, both from City Hall as well as the district, that the building wanted to feel right for the community. So we've been working very hard on that. Appreciate Paul's comments that he's looking forward to the building when it finally arrives in a few years. In any event, as Tina mentioned, we are preserving as much of the 1919 building as we can. We think it's going to be a wonderful feature. Will be greatly improved, essentially rebuilt where it is. And then the new building circling around, as Tina showed, behind it in providing all of the facilities that the school is now desperately in need of. For reference, the building is now about 60% larger than the existing building. So the challenge for us, and we worked hard with the committee about it, was how to make that feel comfortable in the Squantum community. So this is the view of the main entrance, essentially Huckins Avenue sort of off to your left there, and this would be the view as you're approaching the building from the east side. On the parking lot side, there will be an entrance, and again, we're trying to keep the building low and small on this part of the site, both to maintain the existing sort of neighborhood feel, reduce the impact on the neighbors, and just make it feel, in terms of the architectural language, like it belongs in the seaside community of Squantum. This is a view from Mayflower Street, essentially at the corner of the Winslow Street extension. And as you can see there, we're working hard to reduce the scale of the building, make it very much a residential feel, and use materials that are frequently seen around the Squantum neighborhood. In this case, though, we're using terracotta shingles, which we think will give that nice weathered feel that you get from cedar shingles, but without all the maintenance concerns that you might have with a natural wood product. And this is the view from Huckins at the corner of Mayflower. Again, trying very hard to reduce the size of the building and make it look like it belongs in the neighborhood. And as you can see there, really highlight the 1919 building. On the rear of the building, we'll have more day-to-day access entrance to between the school and the field behind. Although it will remain a public park, it certainly will become part of the day-to-day, or continue to be a part of the day-to-day activity for the school children. And so we wanted to make that a nice connection between the building, and then on the left there you can see the gym. And so the gym will be next to the field and available for the community to use at various times and events. Looking on the inside of the building, this is as if you just stepped in the front entrance off of Huckins. And as Tina mentioned, there's a courtyard in the middle, and we're trying to create sort of a walk around the courtyard so that you really have a sense of place and comfort when you arrive, whether you're a student, a family member, or a member of the community. This is at the other end of that main hallway near the rear entrance to the park. And this is the stair going upstairs, again, trying to build a sense of community amongst the students, but certainly providing those sorts of spaces for the neighborhood. This is a view of the inside of the 1919 building. What we are planning to do is convert the building into a new library for the school, but also for the community, and then highlight through some of the structural requirements of the building some of the shipbuilding aspects of Quincy and some of the wonderful aspects of the Squantum community. And finally, the auditorium, where you can see here, we'll have a full-size auditorium and a gym, 2 separate spaces and sized appropriately, a lot larger than the existing ones that will allow the students to have ball games and things. And I'm not sure we've mentioned, the building is being set up as a resiliency hub, so it is being planned for the community in the event of things like power outages, heat waves, things like that, that it would be available, particularly the cafeteria and the gym, available for the community to come in if they so desire. And Tina's going to walk you through the, as Paul mentioned, somewhat lengthy period of time for construction.
Thank you. This first slide already highlights what Paul had mentioned in terms of the improvements that the city has been making with the utilities. I won't go into that too much. But sort of next up, as Paul had mentioned, come spring, you'll see a lot of activity happening around the site, including continued utility improvements that will be happening. But you'll see here that the school will remain open during these times, as well as the park. A portion of the park, as part of our net zero effort for the school project, is we'll be installing geothermal wells. We're going to get a head start on that this spring, so that activity will start happening. And soon after that, once school ends for the summer in 2025, there's going to be a lot of activity happening. Even furthermore, where we will be preparing the 1971 building as well as bringing in modulars to serve the school for the next 2 years while the new building gets constructed. And what you see there would be basically your construction site. It would be safely fenced off. We'll be working very closely with Lee Kennedy in terms of logistics for safety, for the community, for the students, but as well as understanding that parking and various logistics between the construction work and the community will be carefully orchestrated. As that continues, you can begin to see the first phase is really the construction of the school. While the other third of the site will remain functioning as a school. And through that will be for a 2-year period, as you'll see from summer of 2025 to summer of 2027. By fall of 2027, the new school building will be open and all the students from the 1971 building and the modules will move into the school. And then at that point, the 1971 building will be demolished, the modulars will be removed, and the site work would be completed around the school, including improvements to the park. And this is what this is showing actually. So again, throughout this whole period, there'll be some movements in terms of where drop-off will be and where buses will be parking. Ultimately, by spring of 2028, the entire school site as well as the park will be complete and open. And then the last thing we wanted to touch upon is a bit of traffic. As I mentioned, that we've been working with the traffic engineers very closely, how we can improve the traffic on Huckins. That's where the current parent drop-off occurs, which is also sort of the main street in and out of Squantum. The whole idea is to realign Winslow Road with between the park and the school, and bring all the parent drop-off and pick up on that side of the road. And really relieving the traffic that occurs on Huckins. Part of that improvement also is widening Huckins to allow for some on-street parking, as well as on Mayflower. Staff parking is going to be off the streets and it'll be on site, as well as van and bus drop-off. But you could also see that crosswalks is very much part of the design, and having safety for students walking to school or from school with clearly marked crosswalks, as well as a crosswalk signal. From here, I'm going to hand it over to PCA 360, Brian LaRoche.
Thank you, Tina. All right. Again, my name is Brian LaRoche. I'm with PCA 360 with the OPMs for the Squantum School Project. Just to give you a very brief overview of where we are in the process with the MSBA. The project first went into for statement of interest in May of 2020. 1 year later, super fast, the MSBA board voted and accepted the project into their program. And then a year later, the city executed their facilities study agreement with the state. So things have really moved quite fast for the Squantum Elementary School project. And then in early 2023, both our firm and Arrow Street Architects were hired. And here we are at the end of the scope definition, Module 5. We expect to be executing a project funding agreement with the MSBA in the month of December. We didn't lose any time while we were waiting for the MSBA to go through their process. Thank you very much for the appropriation. We asked for an interim to be able to keep the project moving at a very quick pace. So we were able to save about 3 months of time on the project by getting that interim appropriation. So we didn't waste any. You can see on this next schedule, while we're waiting on the execution of the project scope and budget agreement, the design team has been working on the design development of the project. So they have really advanced the project pretty far along. We have a review set that was just issued about a week ago, and the project is being estimated by the architect's estimator and Lee Kennedy right now that we have our construction manager on board. So we're, by the end of December, we're going to start right into construction documents. And then on the schedule I have up there, the construction start I show in April of 2025. That's for the early enablement work, as Tina was mentioning, some of the things we're going to do to prepare the site so that we can be working on one half of the site, keeping the students safe on the other half of the site in the temporary building. So that's where we are in the schedule. And work on the new building will actually start in the fall of 2025 with the completion of the new building in late fall of 2027. So the project budget, on the right of the slide, you'll see that's the detailed project budget. That was emailed around the end of last week. I've simplified it on the left side of the screen because there's an awful lot that goes into building a project budget. So I'll just talk you briefly over some of what goes into each of these line items in the budget. The feasibility study was the first part that you appropriated $1.5 million. We actually went forward. We had saved some money during the procurement, and we were able to advance 2 wells for the geothermal well field that are already permanent for the future. But that gave us a chance to see what was going on very deep. They're 400-foot wells, so we could make sure we could eliminate some of the unknowns. So we used some of that extra money that we had available in the feasibility phase to do some of that work. And then project management is the OPM firm that I work with. We'll have on-site representation throughout the duration of the project. Other administrative, those are some other costs we have for bid advertising, printing, and if we had to do any other estimating, we had some allowance in there. Architecture and engineering, that's Arrow Street and their full team. And then pre-construction, that is, we've brought on Lee Kennedy early in the process. We thought it was really important to have our construction manager be at the table with us as they were working through the design, working on constructability, and also estimating the project. They have their pulse of what's going on in the bid environment, and so they'll be contributing throughout the end of the design process. They'll be meeting with us once a week. And then the construction was estimated. We hired an estimator, so did Arrow Street have their estimator, and that is how we came up with $81 million for the project. It's a little over $1,000 a square foot, which is comparable to many other projects that are right in the MSBA pipeline. So other project costs are the temporary modulars. That $6 million includes not only the modular temporary building, but the foundation, some of the infrastructure that we're going to put in, modifying the 1971 building so that it can house the students for a couple of years. And then construction contingency and owner's contingency, that's customary for a construction project to carry 5%. And owner's contingency, we have a 4% of soft costs. So on the MSBA, the reimbursement, we know it's a grant awarding authority and they're a partner in this project. The rate that we have for this project is 66.24%. How do we get there? A couple of the things that we were able to do, and I'll point out the energy efficiency is 3%. We were able to get the highest reimbursement because we're going for a net zero school building. So that is going to result in additional reimbursement to the city by going above and beyond on the energy efficiency. And then we got a small increase for saving the 1919 portion of the 1919 building. And this is how the MSBA calculates the reimbursement. So one thing I did want to just point out to you, it is a grant program. They have to be fair across the board. So they have some exclusions. And so this applies to pretty much every project. This isn't unique to us. There is some excluded scope in the project because it is a resiliency hub. There are some we have a single shower, male and female, included in the gym. They excluded that space. We had some space in the basement for the mechanical. We have a small area for storage. They excluded that. And these are small things, 300 square feet here, 300 square feet there, about 1,200 square feet. They removed that from their grant. OPM and designer fees, there's a 20% cap. That is pretty low for a project. Other things that they look at is asbestos-containing material. If it's in the floor, if it's in the ceiling, automatically they exclude that cost from the project. Given the age of the building, there are some areas of the building that has that. And then other caps that we have are, there's a $55 cap for site work, $150 cap per square foot for the building. We're over, just slightly over 1,000 square feet, so automatically you can see there's they're going to reduce the grant by an amount. Other things too are the furniture, fixtures, and equipment and technology. When we built Southwest Middle School, the allowance of $1,200 per student is the same, yet the costs have more than doubled since we worked in that school. And then our commissioning costs, they take a small percentage away. And then on owner contingency and construction contingency, the MSBA caps at 1% for construction. It is customary to carry 5%. Every project, new construction, that's what you carry. So we did add a little bit more in for that. And then on soft costs, they cap the 2%, which again, that's too low. 4% is customary, so we did add those in. So when we calculate out the effective reimbursement rate, with the scope exclusions, the MSBA has determined their maximum total grant of $38 million. That means the City of Quincy's local share is about $70 million, the figures on the screen. So when you calculate that out, it's about 35% reimbursement rate overall. Other things we're looking at, other sources of funds. We have, because of the net zero, it does give us some federal grants that are available. They would not kick in until the project's complete. Mass Save, there's energy rebates. We're going to be obtaining some of the highest rebates available for the path that we're choosing with geothermal. And then the state has a program for electric vehicle charging stations too, so we'll be going after that as well. So just under $4 million of other sources of funds that we'll be using to offset this City of Quincy's share of the project of $70 million. So with that, I'll turn it over for any questions that you might have for our team.
Councilor Harris.
Thank you. Paul, Commissioner Hines, I want to thank you and your team. The presentation that we just saw is kind of overwhelming, especially living in that neighborhood. And I know, I don't think a lot of the folks have really been able to see the project that's going to take place. They've seen some of it, but I know the abutters do know exactly what's going on, but I don't think the whole scheme of the whole neighborhood, let alone other parts of the city that's going to utilize this beautiful, beautiful project. I just want to thank you and your team for all your work and what you've presented tonight. And obviously, I'm really thrilled that we had the foresight to take care of the flooding that, as you mentioned earlier, with the drain for Mayflower Road, for Winslow, for, of course, Huckins as well, the houses on that side of the street that have been affected several times over the last X amount of years. And this has been a long road. It actually started before 2020. It started my fourth meeting or my third meeting, and with the help of this body and past bodies, I want to thank everybody who has supported every time we had to re-up our application, and that was, again, long process, but I think in the long run, I hope to see this the first kids get into school in 2027. Is that correct? So it seems like a long time away, but it really, when you think about it, time really flies. And thank you all. I just have a couple of things. Paul, obviously, I'm looking forward to the discussion that we're going to have at the Finance Committee about this project, but I'm going to ask if you could consider a few things, please, if you can keep in mind. When we have a precise handle on the construction timetable, I'd suggest that the construction team have another meeting or workshop with the neighborhood to review what's going to take place, if that could happen.
Oh, absolutely. We do that.
Thanks, Paul. This is a wonderful project. Again, as I mentioned, many years in the making, but we know it's going to be causing it's already causing and going to cause further disruption in the neighborhood. We want everyone to be fully informed about exactly what's going to take place and when it's going to take place. And I think the meeting, which is going to take place, which I really shouldn't even have to talk anymore about it, the constituents will be very pleased about that. And they were pleased in the previous meeting as well, when they saw what was going to take place. But things have changed a little bit, which is great, in how we're handling it, so.
It's more fine-tuned.
And that'll eliminate any confusion, any rumors, or this is how it's going to be done. And this way they know it's going to be done, and that'd be great.
In the meantime, before we do have that meeting,
Yeah.
we'd gladly host. There is a website that's been set up, squantumschool.com.
Right.
Separate from the Quincy Public Schools website. And it's updated regularly with the project plans and these renderings and other information. Generalized schedule, they'll be fine-tuned as we go forward, certainly with Lee Kennedy, and I'm sorry, I whiffed earlier, as well as Steve Silva, the principal. I forgot to introduce him, and I apologize for that. I got thrown off with the technical difficulties. I wasn't on my game. But that, we're using that as a portal, but so anyone, anytime can jump on there and get the information.
Yes, and I saw that. And in my notes, I have, in addition, if we could have asked the construction teams to have a person available to handle questions and perhaps provide regular updates via the website, that's already set up, and possibly an email newsletter, if we can figure something out together with that, because me and technology, it just don't work. I'm a dinosaur, and
Yeah, that's going to be critical because, again, the road work changes, the shifting of pickup drop-offs, bus lanes. It's not going to change once and be set. It's going to change a couple of times, and communication is going to be critical there.
That's wonderful, Paul. Thank you. That's great stuff. And Paul, finally, thank you for the considerations that I've just asked for. And I'm truly looking forward to supporting this incredible project. And congratulations to the administration. Again, another school is going to be, another beautiful school, another beautiful city building is going to be, with the help of state aid and some federal money for the other different programs that are involved. And it's truly a test. And your work in the buildings, Paula, especially that I've had to work with you with, the North Quincy, an example of how you battled through the North Quincy Library during COVID and supply problems. I think you do a fantastic job. And
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll comment also, we're making a presentation to the school committee tomorrow evening as well. So we'll be sharing it through that forum as well.
Councilor Campbell.
Thank you all for coming here today. Thank you, Mr. President. I just had a couple of real quick things. It's obviously an unbelievable project and something that I know we're all excited for, and it's needed. And it's something that I'm really excited to see come to fruition. I think it's definitely something that we're excited. Obviously, looking at the numbers, they're pretty eye-popping. I know that, I think Brian might have mentioned that the cost per square foot was around $1,000. And that's comparable to other elementary schools in the area. Is that, how does it compare to, is that in Quincy or is that elsewhere?
It is amazing that it is. That is the norm. There are other projects that are before the MSBA at the same time, and it's comparable. Some of the larger structures, the high schools and things with more, bells and whistles and the bigger gyms and the bigger auditoriums and all the equipment in the labs, those are even higher. But for it's attractive, but it's not a palace, It's a standard building, and that really is the cost at this point.
And does that, you think that's supply related, or is that just the new reality as to where we are with the whole?
That's the new reality.
Yeah.
It really is. And we're still living with a lot of the old realities. The supply chain issues have not fully resolved.
Mhm.
Electrical gear is still critical.
Yep.
For the temporary condition, we're probably going to be procuring restored and refurbished used equipment for the temporary condition,
Mhm.
because it won't be available in time when we need it if we buy new.
No kidding.
Thankfully, that will be gone. It won't be part of the new building, but you have to plan for these things.
Yeah. So the contingency that we have in there, construction contingencies are around $4 million. The reimbursements, the base reimbursements that we missed out on, obviously that's something that's, things that we can control. I have a feeling that this terrain, based on, you'd speak to it better than I could, but there's probably going to be some unseen changes to it that you just can't predict, and really so I think that's important with the effective rate, to make sure that are there any other plans to work with that to make it so we can find ways to get higher reimbursements, or eliminating certain things. I know that's a long-term thing, but
Value engineering on the design is not completed. There may be some scale backs, but again, there's really it's not that grand. It's simple. It's a simple gym. It's a simple cafeteria. It doesn't have the big science labs, but we're constantly looking. We're constantly changing things. One of the efforts we're going through is reducing the amount of metal panel wall cladding and going with the terracotta, because it's actually cheaper. So there's a constant review of all those factors.
Great. The only other thing I had was squantumschool.com. Who's updating that? Is
Sorry, what's that?
The squantumschool.com, that website? Who updates that? Is that through Brian?
Brian LaRoche has been.
He's all a man. He's a Renaissance man over there, huh? Excellent. All right. Well, great. Thank you.
Score getting the domain name too. So
Nice. Yeah.
Thank you, Council Campbell. President recognizes Council McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just, Paul, thank you, and thank you to the team for tonight's presentation. We've had a nice run with schools here in Quincy over the past 20 years. If you not only wrap in the brand-new schools, then the great working relationship with the MSBA, but also the schools that we've done a number on renovation-wise, boiler-wise, as you know. So with that, Mr. President, I'd make a motion to move this into finance.
Okay. Motion on the floor to move to
Thank you.
finance on the motion. Sorry. We'll take a voice vote. Okay. On the motion, President recognizes Councilor Minton.
Well, just a quick question. I'm not sure who would be able to answer this. This is a state-of-the-art school. Will it be state-of-the-art building security for today's type of intruder?
yes.
Okay, I don't want you to tell
in
us
fact,
trade secrets. I just wanted to make sure that we're doing it.
There's separate
the right way.
meetings ongoing for security, both as far as surveillance, intrusion alarms, secure, and on the regular basis, not just an emergent situation, but a securing of the exterior, particular doorways that are used during the day, pick up the drop-off, all visitors to one door with the office, the man trap at the entrance, person trap at the entrance, so that you can check someone's credentials before they're in the building. That's a whole nother level of design that's ongoing.
Excellent, thank you.
President recognizes Councilor Devine.
Commissioner, thank you very much for coming in. Thank you, everybody else, for the presentation. It's amazing. It's a huge job. The courtyard looks really great. It's going to be, it's stated somewhere that it'll be a classroom too. But all that glass in that open space will be really good for the students. I've been into Southwest a bunch of times in there. Cafeteria is amazing. There's a big wall of windows and natural light comes in. And my son was one of the last to go through Sterling. I think he got 1 week in the new building because there was some delays, but they survived it. It was a little bit of a chore, but it went well. So I hope it maybe you get a soft winter this year and it keeps going really well so that Councilor Harris and his constituents will get in promptly, because it will be a great improvement for them. And while I have you for 1 second, I wanted to recognize too that as big as this project is, it's probably not the hardest thing for you, because I wanted to recognize and say thank you for getting the outbuilding roofed in O'Rourke Field. It probably seems like it's a really small project. It's probably only 6 square shingles and some fascia board. But all those things, that's the nuts and bolts and the nitty gritty that are getting done that people don't see. And so I want to say thank you very much to you and all your department heads.
Keeps the fabric of the neighborhood.
Yeah, yeah. So it's, and the building that you're proposing to build there, it really does look like something that should be in Squantum, so it looks nice. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Devine. On that, we do have a motion to approve or to move to finance. All those in favor? Those opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, Commissioner
Thank you
Hines. Thanks, team. Thanks, everyone, for being here. It's a beautiful looking project. I'm sure Squantum and the city is very much looking forward to this. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Number 2, 2024-127, an appropriation for $4,500,000 for Squantum Elementary School area electrical and communication improvements.
By a little bit of time, Jim Edwards here.
On.
Just changing slides.
Okay.
So as I mentioned earlier, Joe Shea with Granite City Partners is going to present to you on the Tandem project, which involves the underground and the utilities around the site of the school, the widening of the street to allow passage of 2 lanes of traffic and the off-street parking. So the utilities have to move for the roadway work, and going underground helps with our vulnerability protection. So.
While you're all set, just a quick question off the top. Is this separate money than is included in, okay.
Separate from the 100
thanks.
acres.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'm Joseph Daniel Shea. I'm with Granite City Partners, a real estate and engineering advisory firm here in the city, actually located right across the street. We have been part of the Squantum Elementary School team working on all of the elements that are outside of the school property and the park property. These are elements that the MSBA considers non-participating. So they are elements that the city would fund both for the benefit of the school, but also for the benefit of the neighborhood at large. As we heard from the architect in their presentation, we all know Squantum, school is the center of Squantum. It's a resiliency hub. But the school is really the heart of Squantum. This project's going to replace the heart in Squantum. DPW has systematically been replacing the valves, the veins, the arteries, the control system by doing the water main work, the drainage work, and now we are here to talk about undergrounding some of the electrical and communication work. By way of a brief walk down memory lane, maybe. We were here in the spring to talk about getting funds to repair all of the water mains and improve the water mains in and around the school property. That was approved through the city council, and that work was completed just last month. We were also here and we reviewed drainage improvements that have been discussed. But systemic flooding and problems in the yards now have a much larger system to address Huckins, Standish Park, but also to accommodate the future school. Although the school will be infiltrating their surface and groundwater underneath the parking lot, which is in compliance with modern stormwater standards, this new drainage system benefits the neighborhood in and around the school as well. There were also not quite as attractive as drainage issues. There were sewer repairs that were done. The sewer pipes have been modernized through lining. So as the school comes online, sewers on all of these listed streets have been improved. That work has also been completed. And here tonight, we are here to talk about the electrical system. When Commissioner Grazioso and the team were here in the spring, the electrical design was still underway for the school. We're now happy to say that we've coordinated a rather complex dance, to be honest, about the school's phasing with an electrical system that requires temporary connections, temporary transformers, permanent connections, permanent transformers, and the reconnection of a number of residential homes. That design has been completed. Part of the drivers for the electrical and communication system improvements was, as was indicated in the presentation by Arrow Street, is that Huckins Ave and Mayflower are going to be widened. Therefore, the existing power poles on Huckins and Mayflower would need to be moved. We're a modern city. We're always looking to improve our infrastructure. So rather than put up newly located, bigger, taller poles to carry even more wiring, it's all going underground. The same model that the city employed on Hunt Street when the new stadium was put behind North Quincy High School. The same philosophy that was done on Broad Street with the public safety complex, which was also a very well choreographed dance because we needed to keep Father Bill's and Fratelli's up and running while new transformers were installed. There were temporary power to the new city fueling depot. It's a very similar model. It's just in the tightly constrained Squantum neighborhood right around the school. So this project is a separate request from the previous request. It's considered a non-participating cost, and it would be associated with removing the poles, undergrounding the electrical system. There is also Comcast and Verizon components being undergrounded. The city's fiber network would also be undergrounded and updated. And we all know the city's Squantum Fire Station sits right on the corner. So maintaining and enhancing the communications in and out of the Squantum Fire Station is also a part of this request. The project itself wraps around the school site. You see it here in red. The project design is in a package that you have. We are ready to go out to bid, to open bids in mid-December. As was indicated by the architect, this is a bit of a dance. The goal is to perform the electrical undergrounding in early 2025 and complete the work by May 2025 so that the electrical system undergrounding is completed when temporary classrooms come in and when their phase of the next phase of work begins. That may not mean that the system is fully energized, but it means that the infrastructure is underground because, as was previously indicated, the parents and the children need to get in and out of school, and if they're working on the back of school and we're working on the front of school, it's just not going to work. So we've coordinated schedules. They are fortunate enough to have their construction manager on board who can commit to schedules. We hope by mid-December to have the undergrounding contractor on board. We'll get them to commit to schedules. But our goal is to make sure that the electrical system infrastructure is ready to have wires pulled when they are ready to do temporary classrooms. And our goal is in the fall of 2025 to have all the residents cut over. Then the system will be ready as they progress through their various phasing and get to their final transformer locations. This is just a quick cut sheet of a more technical design of what you see in your packet. This is a cut sheet of what is going out to bid. I bring this up for two specific reasons. One is, as was the case with the architect, we are preserving the playground on Standish. We're going around the playground with some underground conduit and adding some transformers. We will be back before you at some point to get some easements approved for the purposes of some new transformers. Basically, everything that's up on those poles now will be coming down and being placed on the ground. In your packet, you have a detailed cost estimate breakdown that was used to create the $4.5 million. It includes a lot of technical details. What is also important for the council to be aware of, and it speaks directly to Councilor Harris's comments, is that we will be holding construction coordination meetings with the neighborhood as we did this last summer. As soon as the 4th of July parade ended, water mains rolled out, fences rolled out, drain lines rolled out, and yes, it was tough. But it was well coordinated and it got accomplished. That same philosophy will be employed for this project. I will say when it comes to communication with constituents, I want to thank one of my staff members, Patrick McCarthy, who's here tonight. Patrick will be out there to meet with constituents. Patrick was the field rep on Hunt Street and Broad Street and here on Hancock Adams Common, so he is very well versed in reaching out to our constituents and understanding how we operate as a city, what we expect of our contractors when it comes to our residents and our commercial constituents. Patrick will be the contact person as this project unfolds. With that, we'd be happy to answer any questions and would ask for a referral to committee.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah. President recognizes Councilor Harris. Sorry. There you go.
Joe, thank you again. And, you know, when you mentioned Hunt Street, I said you just took an example away from me that I was going to talk about. My second meeting. It was there was 4 of us on the council at the time that are present here for that Hunt Street meeting. That was, it was kind of getting a little dicey at times because everybody was concerned about, obviously, the money that was going to have to be spent because it was the football field and the taking overs and it was, but when you can go back in time and then look at the present and see what a difference it made in the look, and especially for the residents there that are still there, you know, it truly was a big difference. And if you see those pictures right there with the wires and the poles, and Brian Palmucci would mention double poles, and right, and all of that, to have that, and what a beautiful building we're building there. It like you said, it is the heart. It's our children that are going to be carrying on first, that are going to really that school. It's so exciting, and to see where we're at this point. And I'd like to make a motion to send it to finance.
Okay.
And Joe, thank you for you've always been right back to me on any of the questions. Your team has done a fantastic job, and I have to tell you, I didn't hear a lot from my folks while that summer work was being done because of the communication that was set up and put forward. So, thank you, all of you folks.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank
Mr.
you.
President, if I may, one element I didn't speak to, although it was also in the architect's drawings, but we are keeping the trees that you can see here on the corner. So the removal of all those wires and the poles will also not impact the trees as they grow.
Wow.
So that, especially that monumental tree on the corner of Mayflower and Huckins,
Right.
is scheduled to remain.
That's awesome. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Harris. There's a motion on the floor to move to finance. All those in favor? Those opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Madam Clerk, next item on the agenda, please.
Number 3, presentation of lead service removal program update, DPW Commissioner Al Gaziota.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Tonight, we just wanted to give an overview of our lead service removal program that is part of the DEP mandate to the 351 cities and towns. With me tonight, City Engineer Paul Costello will be giving an overview of our water system, and Mike Norton, our DPW Operations Manager, will be giving an overview of our outreach to our residents. Mike has taken the lead in kind of running this program, and I just want to acknowledge our team because we've had to do a lot of work in a short period of time to meet the DEP deadlines. Working with Granite City Partners, engineering department, the water department. They've just done a tremendous amount of work to pull this together to meet the requirements for our first reporting schedule, which was mid-October. And we had to go and dig a lot of old records that go back to the 20s and 30s and 40s. So I just want to acknowledge my team before I turn it over to Paul and thank them for the tremendous work they've done on this project.
Good evening, again.
Good evening.
I'm here to discuss a very small component of our water system, but an important component. That's the lead service issues. The services are the pipe from the water main into the house. But before I do that, I want to assure you that the city of Quincy has excellent drinking water. We receive our water from the MWRA. The MWRA provides water to 3.1 million people. We make up about 4% of their whole system. The MWRA has received national awards for the quality of its water. Last year, they received the People's Choice Award from the New England Water Works Association. The City of Quincy, DPW, has also received many awards for the maintenance of our portion of that system. You can see from this first diagram that the MWRA sends us our water 70 miles away. It begins at the Quabbin Reservoir, which consists of 7 different towns. The water travels all its way to Quincy. It goes through a Carroll treatment plant in Marlboro, where they treat the water in addition to other things. And eventually the water finds its way to the Blue Hills water tanks. The Blue Hills tanks provide water to the city of Quincy, Milton, Brookline, and several neighborhoods in Boston. The Blue Hills tanks provide about 20 million gallons of water. The city does about 8 million a day. So we make up a good percentage, 40% of the water coming from Blue Hills. Again, I want to assure you that the city of Quincy provides excellent water. The water is highly regulated by the EPA and the DEP. The water is lead-free, coming from the MWRA and throughout our system. As you know, you've been funding it. The city of Quincy has upgraded our water mains extensively in the last 6 or 7 years. 80% of the old water pipes, largely cast iron and others, have been replaced. So today, our system is predominantly brand-new ductile iron pipe, which is excellent. So there's no risk of lead at all in the distribution system, the water mains themselves. We monitor the system regularly. We're required to test for bacteria and lead on a regular basis. So again, I assure you, the system's fine. The city has 240 miles of water main. There's 2,200 hydrants. I discussed the tanks earlier, and there's 4 pump stations. There's 21,384 total water services that go from the water main into the meters within the house. In the last 6 years, again, we've replaced 38.5 miles of water main, which is about close to 20% of the entire system. During that period, we have been proactive. The DEP last year has required all the cities and towns in Massachusetts, 351 towns, to develop an inventory and submit that inventory to the DEP by this October. The city of Quincy submitted our inventory working with the DEP a year before that. So we've replaced several lead services this year alone. And when I started in 2017, the city that year replaced 150 lead services, well before the DEP required the cities and towns to do anything. So the city of Quincy is well ahead of all the other cities and towns. Our neighbor to the north has thousands of lead services. In many unknown services as well. So we have a very good handle on what we have. So looking at this figure, you can see the water service line is a small diameter pipe, typically 3/4 of an inch to an inch or 2 inches, that runs from the water main, generally goes to a gooseneck. It generally looks like a gooseneck. And it runs across the public way to the back of the sidewalk, typically, called a curb stop. And then it runs from the curb stop into the meter into the house. So every lead service typically has a public component that's in the street, in the sidewalk, and a private component that runs within the yard up to the house. The DEP considers a lead service if there's any part of that pipe has lead. Sometimes you may have lead in the gooseneck neck. Sometimes it might be in the lateral on the public side of the street, and sometimes it's in the service from the curb stop to the house. So when DEP accounts for the number of lead services, any part of the service has lead in it. So as I said, we had to resubmit an inventory to the DEP this past October, and this is where the city stands. The city has 552 suspected to be lead. And again, that's any portion of the service has lead in it. There are also 54 pipes, services that are unknown. The DEP in the inventory assumes that those 54 have lead. We've been finding, based on our investigations, that maybe a third of those might be lead. So worst case, we have 606 lead services. It's probably more likely to be 570, 580. We have to go into the houses. This past year, we notified 108 people in the area that we were working in. 103 people responded. And of those 103, 25 or 30 were found not to be lead. And we replaced 73. So this past year, we replaced 73, which is more than 10%. So the DEP will require that we replace all the lead services over a 10-year period. So we've completed the first year, and we're well ahead of schedule. In the last 6 or 7 years, we've replaced 250. So we've been very, very, very proactive in replacing the lead. So as it currently stands, there's about 2.6, 2.7% of the lead of the services in the city have some bit of lead. And we need to investigate that to confirm it. So again, the DEP required all 351 towns to submit an inventory, and most of the cities and towns are just finishing the inventory and they're starting to replace lead services now. City has been proactive. Back in April 2024, this council approved us to borrow up to $2.5 million from the MWRA. The plan is to encumber 1.5 million of that. The MWRA right now, it's a loan program. There is talk that that may become a grant program if other cities and towns struggle to pay for the services. So the 2.5 million, we plan on publicly advertising a bid this year to replace about 100 to 120 lead services, well ahead of our schedule. 10% of our 606 lead services will be 60. So we plan on doing roughly 2 years' worth of work in the next year. And again, 73 lead services were replaced just this past year. The city has hired a full-time employee now to help us reach out to the constituents and help us keep track of everything that we're doing. And all of our lead services, as with our water system, it's all tracked in our GIS system. So we're on top of, we're pretty sure we know exactly where all the lead is. So with that said, should I take questions, any technical questions? I'll just turn it over to Mike Naughton. A big component of this lead service program is the public outreach. As I said, the lead services predominantly, many of them that remain, have a private property component to it. So there's a lot of community outreach involved.
Good evening. So the city will be mailing out approximately 606 letters to the constituents. We'll be then scheduling appointments to verify what kind of material is in it. If it is confirmed lead, it will be added to the city's list for a no-cost replacement. The city has created a dedicated water service line webpage on the DPW Public Works tab. It will be accessible through the DPW homepage. It allows any property owner to go in and put their address in their property, click on it, and it'll tell them exactly what kind of material is on the public and private side of their property. There we go. Also on the main page, there'll be information. If they have any questions, to contact us. We have a dedicated employee to answer any questions they have. We also have an online service if they would like to request anything via online. It is sli@quincyma.gov. Here is an overview map. It is 3 colors. It is red for lead, blue, non-lead, and gray for unknown. You can, on this map, you can click the parcel, and it'll populate this screen here. On the left-hand side, you'll see the address listed. It'll tell you what the material is on the public side, which is from the main to the curb, and then on the private side, from the back of the curb to the meter. Any questions?
Thank you, Mike. President recognizes Councilor Liang.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just real quick, I actually went somewhere where they had like a warning from the Airbnb that was like, oh, be careful with the water because it's got a lot of lead in it. So when you're brushing your teeth and all of that, it's fine, but otherwise you really shouldn't be drinking it. If you have pets, here's some water for them. And you don't realize, I think, how lucky we have it here, right? Like just how we just don't even think twice about brushing our teeth, taking a shower, drinking water, feeding our pets that same water. And until you go and spend like 3-4 days at a place where you're like, oh, you take a shower and you taste lead. I mean, I was like, I can't wait to get home, right? And I think, again, we take it for granted because we don't understand sort of the underground work that happens all of the time. Even me, when I get these presentations all of the time, I'm not constantly looking out for the work, right? I just know and I trust that it's getting done because I just trust the drinking water here. So I just, I'm sharing that story to really just say thank you, right? Because I think, I'm not sure if a lot of folks understand that like this is an intentional effort to make sure that we're updating all of our infrastructure, but to just make sure too that we just have safe drinking water, right, is so important. So thank you. I just had a question about the communications, obviously just sending out all these letters with the massive Asian American population here. Just want to make sure that letters are translated in any particular language. I know it's hard to tell sometimes the last names, like you can look at my last name and think it's Chinese, but I don't read Chinese, so you know what I mean? It's
are
hard,
at the top, give you information.
Mhm.
And also on the MWRA website, you can click on it, they have it broken out in translation for you. We will have people available if they come in person and they have any questions, it can be translated.
That's great. I assumed as much, but just wanted to make sure. So thank you again.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor Liang. President recognizes Councilor DeBona.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mike, Paul, Al, the entire team of DPW and the water treatments that you guys are doing, thank you for the presentation. These numbers look great. I remember you guys coming in last year and talking about what you were gonna do and how you're gonna do it, and you said 108, you got 103 responses, so there's only 5 that didn't, and out of those you got 73, pipes that you were able to do. And I was talking to Mike offline a little bit about, obviously, some of them are not owner-occupied houses or residents, and how important it is to find and get the landlord or / address of the people that actually own the house that you have to get permission from.
So the letters that are going out are going to the occupants and the property owners. So there'll be 2 sets of letters to those particular addresses.
That's great. I mean, just the technological upgrades of what I've seen on this last slide, of being able to get the property address and then, the service number, the building type, the year built. This is, the material, diameter, just this type of technological upgrade really helps out our residents in a nutshell, to look this up on the computer, you can look it right up probably on your phone if you had to. I think you being proactive and really getting ahead of this 10-year project, after year 1, we've done a really good job, and I'm sure that we'll really investigate the 552 plus the 54 unknowns and really do a good job for this over the next course of the year. So I just want to thank you for all your guys' hard work. This is very important to not only us as a body of city councilors, but to the residents and the constituents out there. So I thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor DeBonne. President recognizes Councilor Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just real quick, I think there's a couple of ancillary benefits to this. There's a requirement, I think, to de-let every house, so I would lead with that in the letters, that this is worth your while to have this type of grant pay for what we're talking about here. But as far as the operation goes, from the street to the utilities to, what part of that is this grant covering? Is it covering the whole ball of wax on that? I gotta imagine there's landscaping items or.
So just to make it clear, the city has, except for the unknowns, any known lead in a city public pipe has been taken care of. Anytime we replace a water main, we replace any lead we find. So this is primarily, except for the unknowns, private property. We take care of that. We go from their property into the house. And part of the grant is we would restore any property damage or anything like that. So it's.
That's great. That's
you know,
great.
If people are willing to let us go in and do it, then we will take care of whatever needs to be fixed.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Campbell. All right, thank you all very much for your presentation. This is important work, and glad to know that we're in such good shape.
Thank you, councilors. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Madam Clerk, next item on the agenda, please.
Number 4, 2024-128, appropriation for $3 million from Sewer and Drainage Rehabilitation Fund for Sailor's Home Pond Rehabilitation Project.
This is almost like a budget season with the presentations and my goodness. And all the commissioners present. State your name and your business.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the council. It is a pleasure to be here this evening before you for a very exciting project, one that has been years in the making, and that is for the project to rehabilitate Sailor's Pond. Nestled within the Beechwood Knoll neighborhood, Sailor's Pond is a 1.7-acre jewel that is in desperate need of remediation. Our plan before you tonight is to dredge out years of sediment and contaminant buildup and restore the pond to its former glory. Contrary to urban legend, growing up in the neighborhood, it is not a bottomless pond, and today we appear before you to help dredge out the sediment that has built up through the years. Any child that grew up in that neighborhood will fondly remember a Sailor's Pond teeming with fish, frogs, toads, and turtles. It was once the quintessential outdoor classroom. Sadly, the chemical makeup of the pond has devolved into an environment far less supportive of natural aquatic life. This project will correct that. Similar to our highly successful project at Butler's Pond, we intend to dredge the sediment and improve the overall health and quality of the pond. Without action, the pond will continue to degrade rapidly. The green algae coating will only get worse, fewer turtles and aquatic life will survive, and fewer birds will stop to rest and feed. This project will preserve the wonderful local natural resource for generations to come. We're excited to come before you with bids in hand, knowing what our costs are going to be for this project. We are also proud to announce that our low bid was a reputable Quincy company in ACK Marine. Before I turn it over to our project team, I want to thank Mayor Koch for his foresight in creating the Natural Resources Department. A project like this one, like Butler's Pond, like Furnace Brook, like the Beachcomber Project, and our efforts to restore our marshes would not be as possible. I also want to thank this City Council for your support of our department and in all its efforts. I also want to thank our Grant Management Department. You may recall during the budget process, I thanked the council for their support of that department. Well, we come before you tonight looking for $3 million, but also with a $1 million state grant in hand to help supplement the costs of this very important project. I want to thank Mr. Scribby and Mr. Kabillion for working with our team in making that possible. And I also want to thank our team here tonight. Environmental scientists had a list who will go into detail about the project. With our help from our own tree warden, Dan Cathcart, I have the utmost confidence that we will present this city with a successful completed project if you support this appropriation this evening. With that brief introduction, I'd like to turn it over to Heather for her portion of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Too many, I have prepared too well and have too many papers to fit on the lectern, so.
Could you take the microphone down so we can hear you? Great, thank you.
Is that better?
That's perfect.
All right. Thank you. Good evening, city councilors, staff, and members of the public. I'm Heather Charles List, the city's environmental scientist within the Department of Natural Resources. I'm very pleased to be with you this evening to discuss the Sailors Home Pond Dredging and Restoration Project. As Dave alluded to, there are a lot of individuals that have had a significant role in supporting this project. And just to give you a little sense of where I'm going with this, ahead of this meeting, the council received a memo with an overview of the site, the pond, the proposed project, and our approach to the funding. So I'd like to go into a little more detail this evening and really largely tell you why we ended up where we did and why we're recommending this course of action as the best choice for restoring the pond. So the project location, as I imagine most will be familiar with, Sailors Home Pond is here at the Red Star. You can see Wollaston Beach off to the north and the east. The site is just north of Marymount Park and an extensive salt marsh system, and it's also not that far from downtown Quincy off in the bottom left. It's located in Ward 5, and I want to start off by just thanking all of the folks from Ward 5 that have supported this project through the years. In particular, our current counselor for Ward 5, Dan Minton, has been extremely supportive of the project, as well as past counselors from Ward 5, Chuck Phelan, Douglas Goutreau, and others. And there has, much like when Butler's Pond was successfully restored, there are a lot of active neighbors that live around the pond that routinely communicate with the city, many of them advocating for work there, many of them participating in cleanups, some of them just doing maintenance of their own goodwill in the pond. And it really has all helped to bring us where we are today. So Sailors Home Pond is unique for a number of reasons. It's one of only 2 freshwater ponds in the city, of course the other being Butler's. The other thing that makes it unique is its location in the landscape. So these are 2 aerial views of the pond. On the left, you can see the pond last year during the growing season, and you'll note that there is a pretty densely developed residential neighborhood completely surrounding the pond. To the right, that is in the dormant season when the leaves are off the trees from 2021. And you get a better view of just how close the pond is to the neighborhood that surrounds it. There's a little fringe of vegetation around the perimeter of the pond, but largely it is right up against those homes. And that it makes it a special and a wonderful resource, but it also makes it a hard place to manage and a hard place to maintain in a healthy state. So one other notable aspect of the area that we find the pond in is that it is right within the FEMA floodplain. So don't worry too much about the small text on this map. If you see the red dot in the middle, that's our project locus, and then the greenish, bluish shading on the map represents the FEMA 100-year floodplain, which is now more commonly known as the 1% annual chance flood zone. And so in addition to the pond's value ecologically as well as recreationally, as an educational resource, it is also an excellent resource from a flooding standpoint. So the pond stores stormwater from rainfall, from melting snow and ice, and from any floodwaters. And restoring it and introducing additional volume can only help with that benefit. So I have a few slides on the history of the pond. I'm not going to read through everything, but I'd just like to highlight a few of the themes that come up as we look at the history of this pond. And there's a lot more out there in the history if you're interested. We have some signs at the site and resources, in the library and in the office. And it really has been a beloved pond for a long time. So as you glance through this history, you'll notice a few things. One, this pond was desired by the community and continues to be desired by the community. It's a man-made pond. Unlike Butler's, it was not created by glacial action. It was excavated from a pasture depression, and it was used to make and hold ice for a dairy for the National Sailors Home. And in addition, some of those products were sold to bring in funds for the National Sailors Home. Through the years, even as the Sailors Home eventually closed, even as the landscape around the pond changed, it keeps coming up in the history that people wanted to preserve the pond, people were using the pond, people loved the pond. And so that's one of the themes that comes through. The other big theme, which is really relevant to the condition of the pond, is the landscape around the pond and the changes that have happened. So, if we go back in time, I'm sure at one point the area was forested, and then around the time that the National Sailors Home opened, it was more agricultural, more pasture land. And then soon after that came a fairly rapid development of that area. So, as early as the 20s, there were a number of small lots going in, and it kind of developed from there. But there was always this desire to maintain the pond. The last thing that you'll notice as you look through this history is that there has been a theme of the pond management sort of changing over time. So early on, the city did occasionally dredge the pond. There's not a lot of detail as to exactly when or the extent to which that dredging happened, but it was enough to maintain the pond. But there wasn't necessarily a lot of research going on around the pond, a lot of actual evaluation of it from a biological or chemical standpoint. Until we reached the 90s, the city did do an assessment of the pond. They actually did some bioremediation work using bacteria, pretty interesting technique. It had limited success. There was some efforts to try to change the general approach that people had to the feeding wildlife, so banning that because that virtually always has a negative impact on small ponds like this. And then came a comprehensive research study that was really critical, I would say, to the years to come and the type of measures that the city started taking. So that was in 1998. Dr. Jonathan Twining from Eastern Nazarene College and a number of his students in the environmental sciences program did a very comprehensive study, measurements of the pond, looking at sediment, water, flora, fauna, you name it, and really showing that the pond was already struggling. It already had a lot of nutrient inputs coming into it, and there wasn't quite as much life as you might have expected, quite as much diversity of life. So why is this? Well, the pond has no natural inlet. There's not a stream coming into it, and there's no outlet. What's getting into the pond is stormwater coming from 5 outfalls, as well as some overland flow just from the abutting neighborhood, and some small input from groundwater. So it doesn't give a lot of opportunity for flushing. Anything that the rainfall picks up, and I know many of you will be very familiar with this from the Butler's Pond project, there's a very good chance that that's going to end up in the pond, whether it's herbicides, pesticides, automotive fluids, trash, debris, and even historic debris, things that maybe we're not polluting now, but that have just accumulated there through the years. And so the city has made some pardon me, the city has made some additional efforts since that study. And it's another moment where I really do want to acknowledge just how much work the residents have put into this, because I was very impressed to see news articles and reports from the local school, Beechwood Knoll, cleanups, scout groups have been out to the pond. So a lot of people have tried through the years. In 2012, the city sort of formalized the management efforts and actually hired an aquatic management company. And again, there was some success, but it's definitely something that needs to continue to be done on a regular basis. And it is just too much for that effort to fully restore the pond. The city has also put in aerators. And then in 2016 came the second big study. This study was done by Weston and Sampson, and we have Darian Kirkjian from Weston and Sampson here with us this evening, who's been around for a long time, including back in 2017, I believe, when this field study was done. So 2016 into 2017, water quality was evaluated, stormwater water quality, and some other measurements of the pond itself. So I'm just going to give you just a few highlights from that research. What it showed was really that, what the folks from Eastern Nazarene College had seen back in the late 90s was still continuing, this trend of a lot of nutrients, a lot of excessive algae growth, lowered oxygen, but it was getting worse. So now, instead of just having, decent oxygen levels throughout, there was decent only at the top, and now it was very low oxygen at the bottom, which is not great for aquatic life. In addition, there's not a lot of fauna left around the pond. We see almost no amphibians, and that was apparent even back in 2016. And there was also a detailed evaluation at that time of the sediment quality. This is important because this helps inform our decision about how to proceed with dredging and how to manage the sediment that's removed from the pond. So what you see there are some of the cores that were taken, and the sediment you can see in these pictures, it's wet, it's mucky, there's silt, there's sand, and there's unfortunately also some contaminants in there. So there's some lead, there's some other heavy metals, there's some petroleum, hydrocarbons, things that you would kind of expect just from the urban location and the amount of time that has gone on without sort of a larger scale process like this happening. The other thing that came from this study was some useful data that we are putting into place for this study, mapping the bottom of the pond. So as Commissioner Murphy mentioned, unfortunately, the rumors are not true. There's a pond bottom. We don't know exactly how far down at this point, but this is bathymetry mapping, which is essentially mapping out the depth of the bottom of the pond. So it's the water depth. At the time that this was done, the average depth of the pond was 2.8 feet with a max of 4.5 feet. Now, that's going from the top of the water surface, and the water was fairly low at the time. So sometimes the water is deeper, but the bottom line is that it's not a large variation. You can see those contour lines are at 1 foot contours, and there's really not that many of them. So it's fairly shallow, and it doesn't get deep very quickly. The second thing that was measured is the sediment thickness. So now we're looking at the bottom of the pond and then characterizing where does that soft sediment that has slowly accumulated over time from organic and inorganic inputs, where does that transition into refusal, like a harder layer, sort of the underlaying, whether it's rock or whether it's harder undisturbed soils from before the pond was excavated. And the numbers for that, the average was 4.2 feet with a max of 9 feet. That's a lot of soft sediment. And that was a number of years ago at this point. So since then, the city has taken a more proactive approach in introducing, frankly, as many new measures as we could into the toolbox of maintenance and management strategies. So we have the beloved fountains, which are actually aerators, and they are helping to circulate the water, helping to introduce some oxygen, which can help with the health of the water. It can also help just kind of turn over that water that gets a bit stagnant at the bottom. But again, it's limited. There's also targeted algicide and herbicide treatments. And with those, I just want to stress that what we're talking about is very safe, targeted for specifically the algae that are in the pond or specifically nuisance or invasive species, using herbicides that are specialized for use around water and also only applied by licensed applicators through our aquatic management specialists. So different than what has been accumulating and causing issues. The other thing that we've started doing is trying to tackle what the root of the problem is. And the big problem here is phosphorus. This is a limiting factor for the algae and other plants, smaller plants and microscopic or macroscopic plants that are in the pond. And so when you get a big flush of phosphorus coming into the pond, they respond by eating that up and just growing out of control. And a lot of the phosphorus is bound up in the sediment at the bottom, and it gets occasionally released into the water column, and so it's the perfect storm, quite literally. And so we've done a number of measures to try to add chemicals to bind up that phosphorus, to try to remove it through filters at the outfalls. And this year, as opposed to past years, we even stepped up our efforts more. So typically our aquatic management company comes monthly during the growing season. This year we brought them in every couple of weeks, pretty much to try to alternate those treatments, see what was the best that we could do with the tools that were at our disposal. And it did make a difference, but it still indicated that it's a challenging problem that needs more attention. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that, of course, there's also a lot of work done by the DPW, street sweeping, cleaning the catch basins, inspecting, cleaning outfalls, and doing their best to try to mitigate what's coming in. And finally, in terms of the data that is informing this study, we did some additional, more recent water quality testing. So every time our aquatic management company comes, they will look at the temperature of the water, the oxygen levels, and how clear or cloudy the water is. And so if you focus in, there's 3 clusters of dots on this map. They each represent a year's worth of dissolved oxygen data. And what you're looking at is a growing season. So April to October, each of those years. So the trend that you're going to see is in April, things look great, and then those numbers sort of drop off. Where we want things to be is 6.5 to 8 milligrams per liter of oxygen. And that's, you can see the 6 and the 8, so within that range, but ideally even higher. And so by the end of the growing season every year, the pond is seriously depleted of oxygen, which is having a real negative impact on any life in the pond. And frankly, a lot of life that might otherwise be in the pond is simply just not present anymore. So if you focus on the group of dots to the far right, that's this past year. And it's a little bit better. So I think that there was a positive impact from those additional treatments that we did, but it's still not meeting that threshold of where we need that oxygen level to be. And we also did some more detailed analyses through a lab of the water last year, and hot off the press or hot out of the lab, I just got the results today for this year. Unfortunately, it's not great, but that means that it's a good time to dredge. So I'm not going to go through all of these metrics except to say that these are the classic measurements that you want to look at to see how healthy a water body is. And the numbers in red are all numbers that are exceeding healthy levels. I'll ask you to focus in on the total phosphorus. That is at over 457 micrograms per liter. Anything over around 96 is considered hypereutrophic. So we're talking about an excessive amount of nutrients that there's just not enough plants to even use all of those nutrients. And then what does grows in these great blooms that are you can see from the chlorophyll number, second from the bottom, is extremely high. That represents just an exorbitant amount of algae. And anyone that's driven by the pond anytime, pretty much in the last few decades at least, it will remember it looking bright green. And that's what that's from. And that's that chlorophyll A number. The turbidity, the clarity is extremely high. So there's not much light getting in for any other organisms that might want to live there. And the nitrogen level is fairly high too. So that can be toxic at higher levels, which it is in the numbers that we're seeing here. So what now? And hopefully I've convinced you already that what we're proposing is the way to go, but we don't just rely on what we think is the way to do things. We look at the data, we also talk to experts and advisors and others out there to see, do they agree that this makes sense? So we spent a lot of time talking to our aquatic management consultants, as well as other specialists, our engineers. wetland scientists, to try to make sure that this was truly the best course of action. And the last line in this quote, I won't read the whole thing, but it's from the last year's report from our aquatic management company, Water and Wetland, sort of going over all the efforts that were made last year. And despite this, the highly excessive nutrients in Sailor's Pond require much more effort. And in an effort to not have all my papers fall off the lectern, I left the results from this year on my chair, but suffice it to say, they strongly recommended dredging and were extremely supportive of the initiative. I think they're almost as excited as we are that we are here tonight before you, asking to hopefully move this project along. So just a little snapshot of what we're proposing for the conditions to look like post-dredging. Obviously, you can't see all the detail, but just note that there are a lot more contour lines. So again, this is showing you 1-foot contour lines. And in this case, we start at 0 is the current level, the estimated current level of those sediments. And so we go from the current level and drop down another 7 feet, in addition to excavating out what's all, a lot of that sediment that's already there. So the max depth would be around 13 feet. We remove a large volume of material that has contamination in it, that has these excessive nutrients, that has organic material that is just simply not going to decompose sufficiently at this point. And so not only do we reset the clock, but we also now have a water body that's deeper and can do a much better job of circulating that water. So there's going to be a lot more space for organisms to live. And I'm sure that within a short period of time, there will be much healthier conditions, as evidenced by Butler's Pond, which is looking fantastic. We have the same company that goes out there, and every time they come, they pretty much say, oh, Butler's, this is one of the best ponds that we take care of, and Sailor's, this is one of the worst. So we're hoping that we can have them both be two of their best. The last piece that I want to mention is that in addition to the actual dredging of the pond, of course we want to address the problem, but not just the historic sediment that's in the pond, but also the stormwater that continues to introduce nutrients and other contaminants into the pond. So if you look on the bottom of the screen and to the left, those circles with the little X's in them, those are the 5 outfalls that currently feed into the pond. And we are working with our engineers at Weston and Sampson, the design team, on a stormwater management design that will incorporate some bioretention, i.e. rain gardens, so that we have some aesthetically pleasing features within the park that are really, really good at removing excessive nutrients. And then, of course, we're working with our DPW. We'll be continuing to work with them, but working with them to make sure that anything that we implement will fit in and tie in well with the city's system, and making sure that that gets properly maintained going forward. So along with that, we are planning to, of course, restore any of the upland that gets disturbed during the course of the construction. And then we are using this as an opportunity to try to tackle the invasive plants that are around the edges of the pond. We've pretty much identified those, and some of them are just showing up, so it's a great time to stop those before they get worse. And we will add back beneficial native plantings as well, and some new interpretive signage. So hopefully we can go from the top picture, which reminds me an awful lot of Nickelodeon Slime back in the day. That is a picture I took of one of the outfalls. And then on the bottom is a picture of a lovely bioretention area. So finally, I'm just going to highlight a couple of items on the estimated cost estimate and what we're requesting for funding. So on the left side of your screen, this is a listing of the expenses that are going into the appropriation request this evening. They are from a variety of sources, from actual bid to quotes we've gotten from vendors, or estimates that we've made based upon other projects. And so the costs are for dredging, material disposal, construction and sediment management oversight, stormwater management survey and design, and the stormwater management construction. That puts us at $3.6 million. We add in a 10% construction contingency to have just shy of $4 million, 3.997. And then if you shift your attention to the bottom right, you will see a box explaining the grant funding that Commissioner Murphy mentioned, a $1 million grant. Thanks very much to the Massachusetts Executive Office of Economic Development. This year, they did a pilot program for inland dredging. So the inland dredging pilot round of their Massachusetts dredging program, which is a long-time program. I have to mention as well that the team that reviewed the application was not only very impressed with the merits of the project, but they really could not stop talking about the community support and just through the years how much support the community has shown for this project and for other similar projects. So thank you again to everyone. So if we take that off, that leads to our total funding request of $2,997,185. And finally, the top right, the additional expenses that we anticipate covering from the Department of Natural Resources operating budget is about $100,000. And I've already talked about the bottom three, but I just want to mention the reptile relocation. We are hard at work, working on a plan to relocate the turtles that are in the pond. There are painted and snapping turtles. We did that for Butlers, or I should say my predecessor and the team did that, and we certainly won't forget about them here. So we'll be working again with the New England Wildlife Center and likely the New England Herpetological Society to make sure that those turtles are taken care of. And the story doesn't end here. We fully intend to continue managing this pond going forward. If you look closely, so these are the 4 seasons, and there's something interesting and exciting going on all the time, even now. There were a lot of beautiful dragonflies in the spring in that first picture I took on the top left. There's an egret and a black-crowned night heron, barely visible in the summer picture in the top right. There's 2 painted turtles in the fall picture that I just took this fall, and then you can just barely see an ice skater last winter on the opposite end of the pond. So clearly there are a lot of people as well as critters using the pond, and hopefully more in the future. So with that, I thank you so much for your time and consideration for our proposed project, and myself and the rest of the team will be happy to take any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Appreciate it. This is just going into finance. So what? Oh, been lied to. All right. So President recognizes Councilor DeBona.
Thank you, Mr. President. Heather, Commissioner Murphy, thank you for coming in tonight. I appreciate the team being in here. Over the years, being on the Community Preservation Committee for the last 9 years as a City Council's representative, Dave Murphy had served with me at some point, and we had this come in a few times, and we just couldn't find the button to fund it. We just, through the CPC. We did do some modified ones to look at the study to do it, and I thank you for, and then the inception of the Natural Resources Department and the environmental scientists like yourself, thank you for coming in and be the specialist to this. This is a much-needed project. First, you get a little track record with Butler's Pond and having the dredging happen there, and it's really updated that particular area and the smell. I don't think you talked about it tonight too much, but there is a scent of this Sailor's Pond not being dredged. I've talked to a lot of the abutting neighbors, Ridgeway especially, because their backyards really abut the Sailor's Pond. I talked to them lengthily over the last 9 years in their backyards about the smell, and I'm glad we're here tonight to really tackle this situation and purify it. So you talked about the ice skating. 2020, when the COVID hit us, that winter, the 2020 to 2021, there was really not much we could do, and it was cold enough to go out there and ice skate. And I would see the residents, they would come out and they'd wave at all of us out there skating. So my boy likes hockey, so we went over to Sailors and we still skate out there. Last few seasons have been tough with the weather. It hasn't been cold enough, but it kind of got us through that little COVID period when that first year was in. So I think this is a great project. It's much needed. Thank you for the $1 million grant that's going to dip into this, drop it from $4 million to $3 million. I really think this has finally come here in front of the council. I know I talked to Commissioner Murphy about this over the last few years in general, and great timing. So with that, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to approve the funding.
Motion approved
$3
made by
million.
Councilor DeBona. On the motion, President recognizes Councilor Campbell.
I just had a quick question, actually two. One was, is there any CPC money available for this? Is that a possibility? Do we exhaust that? I don't know if that's possible. About CPC, there's no CPC. I know that CPC paid for part of the Butler, so.
Mr. President,
I think to Councilor DeBonne's point, the CPC funding, the studies is how we arrived at this point.
Okay.
So they have set us up, and now with the help
Gotcha.
of the two accounts that we're tapping into, I think we get over the finish line.
And just as I would be willing to support this is if Commissioner Murphy promises to do a backflip or some type of dive into the couple laps or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, like Bill Weld, when he did the Charles River, yeah.
I'd like to see him do it first.
Maybe we'll pay him not to do it.
I'm doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, do you have an answer to that? Are you going to do it? Sure. I mean, you want the money, right?
I mentioned I grew up in the neighborhood. I've done it multiple times. You just weren't there to see it, so.
Okay. Thank you, Council Campbell. President recognizes Councilor Liang.
Thank you, Mr. President. I echo everyone's, I think, excitement and sentiments up here. And Heather, thank you so much. This presentation was so thorough. And every time something like this comes up, I'm always like, I learned something new about things that I would never even know about. Just two questions about the finances. So the first is there going to be something built into, Commissioner, your budget for ongoing maintenance year over year? Because this is obviously a very important project that we're going to do now, but it's a one-time thing, right? And so I'd love to see if we can then support sort of any ongoing mitigation efforts as well. So is there a plan to do that for next budget year season to incorporate something just for continued maintenance for Heather?
Through you, Mr. President. Yes, Council, there is. There's actually something built in there right now. Heather has been working with Wetland and Waterland to, Water and Wetlands to do exactly what we're talking about for the ongoing maintenance. So with the existing budget we have, when the invasive species control line that the council has supported, we should be in good shape going forward.
Great. And I guess my second question then too is I appreciate that we have it budgeted, but I also, respect that we're at, the mercy of Mother Nature and things might come up that are out of the control or out of the budget that we have. And so do we anticipate that in, the near future, like we're talking 3 to 5 years, we may need to see another larger one-time appropriation for something? Or do we think that the mitigation at this point should be sufficient?
I think for this particular project, Council, this thrust of money will put us in great shape for large capital expenses for some time to come. That's not to say that we aren't cooking up some other great projects moving back before the council or the CPC in the future years.
No, I mean, to your point, Commissioner, let's take care of our resources, right? So I'm really happy to support this as well. And thank you again, both for your time. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor Liang. President recognizes Councilor Minton.
Thank you. Commissioner, thank you very much, Heather. I appreciate you meeting with me, looking over the pond and coming up with some ideas. I also want to reiterate that former city councilors for Ward 5, Doug Huttrell and Charles Phelan, did most of this work, and they made it very easy for me to get to where we are. You asked if you convinced us. Well, you convinced us, me anyway, so that I've already set up a meeting December 3rd. It's a Tuesday, 6:30 at Beechwood Knolls School for those out in TV land who want to attend. Also get in touch with Beechwood Knolls School so that they'll know to educate the people driving and walking what's going to be happening there. And Mr. Grannon, I'll be in touch with you to talk about throwing some safety measures in there too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Minton. Okay. There is a motion on the floor made by Councilor Brown. Councilor McCarthy, did you want to say something? No. Okay. Oh, hello. President recognizes Councilor Devine.
Thank you for coming in with this presentation. I didn't realize we only had 2 ponds like that. Very impressive. I see that, is there a lot of hydrogen sulfide in there? Or is that not in it?
So that has not been part of the testing. I would imagine that there is some.
Yeah, I would think there would be a
but
lot.
I also think some of it is, there's a lot that's trapped in the sediments.
Yeah, of course.
Frankly, that's not in a gaseous form necessarily, or that is.
It's not going to help with
Got a solution.
the fish. They're not going to like that. So then you also have surface aerators. Is there any talk of using ones down below? I know the surface ones look nice and, it's a little fountain and people are like, wow, but I don't know how much oxygen that really gets down below. Is there ever any talk or thought of, pods or something that would, because they do make them?
There is. That's a really good question. And it was something that I was also curious about early on. So currently, because of the depth of the pond, a surface aerator is really the best solution. as they're sort of spreading out. So let me back up. The aerators that sit on the bottom send out, a stream of air that's sort of coming up in a V, and it can only go so far. And so because of the shallow depth, you would end up having a very small circular area that would actually be impacted, as opposed to the surface aerators tend to push that surface water a little further out. They don't mix the deeper layers as much, but you're kind of doing the best that you can at that point. And I think there's a bit of a fondness for the aesthetic of the surface ones.
I mean, it could be
but there are ways
incorporated,
to
though.
combine both, exactly.
Yeah.
So at Butler's, now that that pond has been dredged, we have 3 aerators that are at the bottom, that are permanently
Oh, okay,
installed.
good, yeah.
Yeah, and we turn them off for the winter, so there's still the opportunity for the pond to ice over, possibly for folks to skate, but then they can easily be turned on again and not need to be removed. That's another advantage. The ones at Sailors, we actually take out each winter to avoid damage.
Yeah, I noticed in the picture that it wasn't there.
Yeah,
And
yeah, so they're
the
removed
winter
and then
picture
they'll go
because
back
it was
in
there,
the
yeah. And then you said you're gonna, it sounds like you only have turtles in the pond now that survived?
Yeah, so we have, there's definitely turtles. We've observed painted turtles and snapping turtles. Very hard to judge how many, but there's clearly a decent sized population, and you see them basking, occasionally swimming. The visibility is incredibly poor. So in terms of inches, I mean, middle of growing season, 2 inches is
So when
maybe
you
4
said-
inches down. So there's a lot that you can't see.
Yeah.
I keep looking for fish and have not been able to find them. Really, I've heard some frogs, but very minimal, and I have not seen any. And so, a lot of these animals that were there in the past, I think the habitat quality has gone down and the food sources have gone down. You've got this crazy amount of algae, but you don't really have any of the tiny animals, the invertebrates, the zooplankton that would normally kind of make the bridge to like fish and them having enough food. And then maybe we would have some more waterfowl, predatory birds, that kind of thing. So there's a lot, I think, that will come back once we
Well, that was
give it a
my
little
next
time.
question, is you're gonna, if you take the turtles and you're gonna relocate them, then are you gonna bring turtles and fish back? Are we
Yes,
gonna
so
stop
any
the
turtles
tunnel?
that we remove, this would be done with a permit from the Mass Wildlife, the Mass Division of Fish and Game. They would only be temporarily relocated, and then they would come back to the pond afterwards, hopefully even a little bit healthier, and
Yeah.
then, we would continue to monitor them. At this point, the general consensus when it comes to dredging is there's a little bit of a, you take that action and then you need to give a period of time, at least a couple of years, maybe a few years, for the pond to respond to that and to recover. And then at that point, we might look at, are there other things that we should try to introduce? It's very likely that we will, thank you for the good question, Councilor Liang, about going forward, that we will indeed need to continue our maintenance on this pond because it's still within a fairly tight urban area. So and it's still very sensitive. But I'm pretty confident. It's surprising how many things are mobile and show up. So I think that you'll see quite a rebirth, if you will, of the
Yeah, no,
the
it sounds,
life that's
it
there.
sounds really
that once
good, and
was.
even just looking at the algae in this picture that you have in the presentation, it's clearly way too much. But I know you're a scientist, and I love that. I love that we have an environmental scientist for us in Quincy.
Thank you.
We have a lot of huge environment. I mean, even in Ward 4, we have all of the Blue Hills, so you're a very important asset to us, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We have a motion on the floor to approve this from Councilor DeBona, seconded from Councilor McCarthy. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Counselor Ash. Counselor Campbell. Counselor Devine. Counselor DeBona.
Yes.
Counselor Harris. Counselor Liang. Counselor McCarthy.
Yes.
Counselor Minton. President Kane.
Yes.
9 members, excuse me.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Thank you very much, Commissioner. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you all very much.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Number 5, 2024-129, a gift for $1,500 from various donors for DARE.
Motion approved made by Councilor McCarthy, seconded by Councilor DeBona. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Counselor Ash. Counselor Campbell. Counselor Devine. Counselor DeBona.
Yes.
Counselor Harris.
Yes.
Counselor Liang. Counselor McCarthy.
Yes.
Counselor Minton.
Yes.
President Kane.
Yes.
9 members.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That concludes our regularly scheduled program tonight. Approval of previous meeting minutes, both for October 7th and October 15th. The motion to approve made by Council McCarthy, seconded by Councilor DeBona. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it. Communications and reports from the mayor, other city officers, and city boards. Madam Clerk.
I do have some traffic requests to refer to Ordinance Committee for Advertising, Ward 4, Councilor Devine, add handicap parking at 35 Brooks Ave, add no parking on both sides of Filbert Street from 46 Filbert Street to the dead end. Ward 5, Councilor Minton, add handicap parking at 4 Euclid Ave, add 2-hour parking on the even side of Euclid Ave from Roslyn Ave to dead end. Add 2-hour parking at the odd side of Euclid Ave from Roslyn Ave to 137 feet north of Roslyn Ave. Add no parking on the odd side of Euclid Ave from 137 feet north of Roslyn Ave to the dead end. Also, this evening, utility request to refer to Public Works Committee for scheduling and advertising, grant a location, National Grid Verizon, 47 Newberry Ave, grant a location, N-Grid Verizon, Independence Ave at Oak Grove Terrace, grant a location, National Grid Verizon, Franklin Street at Penns Hill Road.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Unfinished business and preceding meeting, seeing none. Reports of committees, Chair of Finance Committee, McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr. President. Earlier this evening, I had a Finance Committee meeting. It was all in roadway improvements, infrastructure improvements across the city. I want to thank DPW Commissioner Al Grazioso, Director Grennan, their teams for the work they've done. And I'd like to make a motion to approve 2024-122, $24 million from Sewer Enterprise Fund for infrastructure and roadway improvements in the form of a motion.
Okay, motion to approve appropriation for $24 million from the Sewer Enterprise Fund for infrastructure and roadway improvements. Do I have a second? Seconded by Councilor Campbell. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilor Ash.
Yes.
Councilor Campbell.
Yes.
Councilor Devine.
Yes.
Councilor DeBona.
Yes.
Councilor Harris.
Yes.
Councilor Liang. Yes. Councilor McCarthy.
Yes.
Councilor Minton.
Yes.
President King.
Yes.
9 members.
Secondly, appropriation 2024-123, $5.5 million from the Water Rights Enterprise Fund for infrastructure and roadway improvements. I put that in the form of a motion.
Motion to approve appropriation 2024-123 for $5.5 million from the Water Enterprise Fund for infrastructure and roadway improvements. Motion made by Councilor McCarthy, seconded by Councilor Devine. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilor Ash. Yes. Councilor Campbell. Yes. Councilor Devine. Yes. Councilor DeBona.
Yes.
Councilor Harris. Yes. Councilor Liang. Yes. Councilor McCarthy.
Yes.
Councilor Minton. Yes. President Kane.
Yes.
9 members.
And finally, 2024-124 appropriation for $12 million from the general fund for infrastructure and roadway improvements in the form of a motion.
Motion to approve made by Councilor McCarthy for $12 million from the general fund for infrastructure and roadway improvements, seconded by Councilor Liang. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilor Ash. Yes. Councilor Campbell. Yes. Councilor Devine. Yes. Councilor DeBona.
Yes.
Councilor Harris. Yes. Councilor Liang. Yes. Councilor McCarthy.
Yes.
Councilor Minton. Yes. President Kane.
Yes.
9 members.
That concludes. Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair McCarthy. Ordinance Committee, President recognizes Chair Liang.
Thank you, Mr. President. So we've got 3 tonight. The first is in Ward 1, 2024-119, at a stop sign on Wampatuck Road at Norton Road. Positive recommendation out of committee.
Positive recommendation made by Councilor Liang, seconded by Councilor McCarthy. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilor Ash. Yes. Councilor Campbell. Yes. Councilor Devine. Yes. Councilor DeBona. Yes. Councilor Harris. Yes. Councilor Liang.
Yes.
Councilor McCarthy.
Yes.
Councilor Minton. President King.
Yes.
9 members.
Thank you. The second is now to Ward 2, 2024-120, at handicap parking at 39 Key Street. Positive recommendation out of committee.
Positive recommendation made by Councilor Liang, seconded by Councilor McCarthy. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilor Ash. Yes. Councilor Campbell. Yes. Councilor Devine. Yes. Councilor DeBona.
Yes.
Councilor Harris. Councilor Liang.
Yes.
Councilor McCarthy.
Yes.
Councilor Minton.
Yes.
President Kane.
Yes.
9 members.
Last one out of Ward 4, 2024-121, add handicap parking at 14A Intervale Street. Positive recommendation out of committee.
Positive recommendation made by Councilor Lang, seconded by Councilor McCarthy. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Counselor Ash. Counselor Campbell. Counselor Devine. Counselor DeBona. Counselor Harris. Counselor Liang.
Yes.
Counselor McCarthy. Counselor Minton. President Kane.
Yes.
9 members.
That's it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Presentations of petitions, memorials, and remonstrance. President recognizes Councilor Campbell.
Yeah, I just wanted to take a moment, a very special woman from a very special family, Quincy family. She's lived here for 61 years. She was 95 years old. Joan Glennon, she was originally from South Boston. She came here, married her husband Ronnie. They were married for 66 years, and they had 6 children: Kathleen, Ronald, Joanne, Sheila, Elaine, and Sean Glennon, who is a Quincy police officer. She will be sorely missed. She was a proud member of the Local 26, where she worked in the Boston hotel industry for a number of years. She was the quintessential Quincy mom. She was the CCD teacher at different religious ed groups, Sacred Heart, Our Lady Good Counsel, and St. John's. I think every mom in the city has had that role, and she played it really well. So she was a loving grandmother of 11 and great-grandmother of 8. She loved spending time in their home at Lauderdale by the Sea. And if you can judge someone by the children they raised, I think that she did a remarkable job at raising some incredible humans. So I wanted to extend our thoughts and prayers to the family on a wonderful lady.
Thank you, Councilor Campbell. President recognizes Councilor Ash.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to mention and pay respects at tonight's meeting to Mrs. Jacqueline Glavin, AKA Graham, who I know many folks sitting up here either know her as or even referred to her as Graham affectionately. Similarly, another very maternal grandmother or motherly figure that I've known my entire life, Quincy Point family, the Glavins. Mrs. Glavin was survived by her 6 children, Mary Jo Brogna, Jean and Jim Dodd, Jackie and Paul Glavin, Janice and Ed Conway, as well as Brian Glavin, who's the city's director of IT, and Billy Glavin of Norwood. I wanted Mrs. Glavin, you'd usually see her out on a Friday night with one of her children. Whoever had her that night, I know a lot of times it would be Brian, but she was always out and about, very social, a daily communicant of St. Joseph's, an absolute love and joy to be around, and she is sorely missed and will be for many days to come. So my respects and well wishes to the Glavin family.
Thank you, Councilor Ash. President recognizes Councilor DeBona.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sadness of Elizabeth Liz Bowes had passed away. Liz was a devoted mother, cherished grandmother, and dear friend to many. Her warmth and kindness touched many lives of everyone she met. In her final moments, she was peacefully surrounded by her family, who offered her love and support. And now she's reunited with her son, Donnie, in heaven. Liz's spirit will live on in the hearts of those many who loved. She was a loving and devoted wife to Donald Bowes Sr. for the past 62 years. Her children and grandchildren will forever be her most cherished gifts. She leaves behind her greatest gifts, loving mother of late Donald Bowes Jr. and his wife Christine, Thomas Bowes and his wife Kathleen, and Michael Bowes. Liz was a proud grandmother of Thomas Bowes Jr. and wife Catherine, Donald Bowes Jr., Elizabeth Bowes Ferner and her husband Timothy, Jennifer Bowes, Shane Carvels, Matthew Bowes, Caitlin, and Bridget Sawyer. They will all carry on her legacy of her love and kindness, and Liz is survived by many much-loved nieces and nephews. Just please keep the Bowes family in your thoughts and prayers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor DeBona. Motions, orders, and resolutions. Scheduling of committee meetings and public hearings. Our next council meeting is next Monday, November 18th at 6:30. Motion to adjourn made by Councilor Liang. All those in favor? Those opposed? Have a good evening.